guests we've had where people emailed us and texted us questions ahead of time. So, Judge?
Yes, sir.
He's
Okay.
there. He's there.
And we're going to go on. And we are the
Yep.
Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. Over the past week or so, we've been fortunate enough to entertain, if you will, to have join us here at the Coalition Studios in the bunker with our heroes, Dick Cheney and Spiro Agnew, a number of the presidential candidates running for the Libertarian Party nomination. I will continue to extend the invitation outward. If folks are interested in joining us, they're a candidate, and that can be for down-ballot races as well. We will make every effort to host you, A, in the interest of fairness, and B, simply because part of the purpose of this organization is to further libertarian candidates at every level, to give you the exposure, the practice, the challenge, if you will, of reaching out to a greater audience. And in doing so, spread your message, talk about yourself, but also bring together the Libertarian Party. Our guest tonight has actually a special role, if you will, in libertarian history. Libertarian, I should say, Coalition Radio history. He was one of the first guests ever to join us on what we call the Coalition Radio 1.0, back when we had just gone on for the first time onto AM radio. I believe we were still on AM 1290, a very local station. Judge Jim Gray, of course, is synonymous with the war on drugs. And at that point in time, he came on not as a candidate, not as even a libertarian per se, but with an organization called LEAP, which at one point was the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, taking at that time a challenging role as one of the first organizations representing law enforcement that were active in the war on drugs. Since then, and before then, he was a graduate of the University of Southern California Law School. He was appointed as a local municipal judge and then rose to the Orange County bench at the appointment, if you will, of George Jumakian. It's been a little while. In doing so, he interacted directly with human lives and again, the if you will, the effects of the war on drugs. And we'll talk about that at length going into the show. He has been a candidate for the United States Senate. He is well known for being the first running mate to Gary Johnson in 2012 as the Libertarian Party nominee for the vice presidency. He joins us via the miracle of IP. Judge Jim Gray, welcome back, if you will, to the coalition. You are the longest running officially tonight, what we call repeat offender. Thanks for joining us.
Pat, it's always good to share thoughts with good people. It's nice to be back with you. And I don't think you're going to be able successfully to prove that you're the chief narcissist, but we'll have to see as we go along.
No, I am unequaled in my narcissism. I am the best narcissist in the world. Something that I leave to that guy named Orange Cheeto, I leave him in the dust. So there you go. No one beats me at narcissism. Judge, we're going to spend an hour or so tonight talking about your background, your career, how it brought you into the libertarian movement, the 2012 election, issues. But, I have never received as many question requests, if you will, from the audience prior to a show as I have tonight. And I've had a lot of folks in the libertarian movement. I had John McAfee on during the 2016 election in a great, let's just say, far wide-ranging interview. I had Gary Johnson. I've had folks who are subject matter experts in literally dozens of think tanks on, from Cato to Heritage to Goldwater to FIRE. But this week, you rang the bell. I would be remiss if I didn't just get this out of the way, because the rest of the evening is going to be focused on issues. Folks you have a wonderful reputation in the libertarian movement, and well-earned, well-deserved. Folks were surprised by your late entry into the race. In doing so, you've got quite the ticket with you and Mr. Sharp is running as your vice presidential candidate. What was your motivation, if you will, for sort of just jumping in at this late moment, what was there a particular issue that you felt wasn't being addressed? Was there a gap, if you will, in the wide range of candidacies that we've got already in the 2020 race? What was your motivation, and what are your thoughts?
That's certainly a fair question, and it came out of the blue for me. I was not at all anticipating doing this. Actually, neither was Larry Sharpe. I was supporting Governor Lincoln Chafee from Rhode Island as his presidential campaign, and I was on a telephone conference call with him and his staff a week ago Saturday, not long ago, and he said at that time that he simply was going to drop out of the race. He wasn't getting traction, and he was going to withdraw. I pleaded with him, literally pleaded with him to stay in. Governor, you are someone that really can bring stature to this race. You've been there in administration. You were the only Republican U.S. senator to vote against going into Iraq, which gives you great credibility in my eyes. And you understand school choice. You understand the deficits. Please, as a matter of patriotism, please stay in the race. I tried it several times, Pat. His voice came back. It was flat. He said, Judge, I have made up my mind. So he hung up the phone, and his staff then was still on the phone, and they asked me if I would take his place. And I said, no, that's just not what I've been anticipating. I'm not going to do it. They said, well, come on. As a matter of loyalty to the party and the country, please consider it. So I said, all right, look, I'll take 2 or 3 days. Let me think about it. I'll talk to some people and see where we go. And during that 2-day period, I called numbers of my friends in the libertarian movement all around the country. Candidly, they were really enthusiastic, encouraging. And so finally, I was talking to Larry Sharpe, and I told him, Larry, if you would run with me as my running mate, I will do it. I will throw my hat in the ring. And his answer was, quote, yes, 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 unquote. He said he needed about 2 or 3 days in order to put some financial arrangements together for his family. And then we decided to do it. We had a ready-made campaign staff, and I asked the campaign chairman for Jeff Hewitt, who ran successfully for the Board of Supervisors here in Riverside County as a libertarian. So we are together, we are running, and it came out of the blue for me, but I'm enthusiastic because this isn't a time, Pat, and I know you agree with this too. We must, as a country, have a third voice out there. The idea that only Biden, only Trump, we must bring in other issues. We must bring in other voices. And I feel within me that I am the person that can really be that third voice. I'm anxious to do it if, in fact, the Libertarian Party chooses me as their nominee.
Thank you. In describing your candidacy, there's been a lot of conversation in the race as it stands right now, and in the 6 or 7 months where we've been doing conventions and doing the business, if you will, of politicking, about the role, if you will, as a speaker to someone who is able to give voice to our statement of principles and the underlying philosophy of the party. Now, that's always been an historical tension, if you will, with the need to work towards ballot access. That has always been the creative tension. And after a handful of races, in particular the 2016, where, to be blunt, in the vice presidential role, there was confusion about our statement of principles and our philosophy and our platform. There has been a considerable element towards, if you will, a radical / Mises / libertarian candidate's libertarian campaign. And what my folks have been yearning for is someone who will take the stage and, with great authority and with great dignity and a sense of purpose, determination, and absolutely no, and I'll use the term embarrassment, because our prior vice presidential candidate appeared at times to be embarrassed by our platform. No embarrassment, no reticence whatsoever, delivered to the people of America what they've so desperately needed for so long, which is an explanation that was cogent and sincere of what the underlying principles of the Libertarian Party are. Are you saying you're ready to take on those challenges, to have a conversation about, as some of us would like to do, ending public education, as some of us would like to do, and you've given great credence to ending the war on drugs for someone who wants to bring our troops home now. Is that something that you're ready to do?
The answer is yes. Next question. Well,
Excellent.
I'll fill it in a little bit more.
Okay.
I feel that we have made, as libertarians, an enormous mistake for the last decades. And that is, we have allowed other people to brand us. And how do they brand us? Well, Ian Rand's slogan, greed is good. Well, she meant it in the way that if you act in your own economic self-interest and everyone else does too, the invisible hand will work, et cetera, et cetera. But, we're seen to be greedy. We're seen to be survival of the fittest. We're seen to be no government at all and free drugs for, and the answer is no. We believe in responsibility. And Pat, I can tell you the archetype libertarian that I can think of, the prototype is Thomas Jefferson, who said, I don't care if you worship one God, 20 gods, or no God. It doesn't pick my pocket and it doesn't break my leg. In other words, live and let live. That is as precise as I can be to describe who we are as libertarians. As far as the troops coming home, good gracious sakes. We have so many wonderful people in the military who, when they receive their orders to go into battle, say, salute and yes, sir, and then they go. We have an absolute obligation to make sure that we've had a declaration of war before we send these troops off into battle. And I tell you right this minute, we've been having our troops in Afghanistan for what, since 2002, 2001? Do we even know what the goal is? We've never had a declaration of war, and this is an atrocity. We must bring those troops home. In addition, and I'll take this from Ron Paul, he said, and I think the number is correct, that we have something on the order of 400 military reservations in other countries around the world. 400. We should do an audit of those and see which ones are necessary for our security and our national interests and which are not. And if they are, maybe we can reinforce them. But if they're not, let's close it down and bring them home. Times have changed. We need to do that. And I bet you that of those 400, if you let the military look at it honestly, we could close 300 of them without even starting the conversation. These are things that we will bring to the government. We will bring an audit to the federal government. And when I was running for Senate, you mentioned that was back in 2004, the U.S. Senate, I would begin my comments with, let's have an audit of the federal government. Let's have sunset provisions for all federal agencies. And that means that every, 7 years, whatever, each individual agency would be required to come in its own, showing us what they have done in the last 4 or 5 years, how much money they have spent, what they've accomplished, and then what they plan on doing in the next 4 or 5, 7 years, and how much they expect to spend. Then we can see, wait a minute, there's a duplication here. There's no need to do that. This is not a federal issue, that's a state issue, etc., and pare it down. So yes, I would reduce the size, the cost of federal government. Last thing is, I will acknowledge to you that the federal government, big government, is really, really good and effective at one thing, and that is increasing the size, the cost, and the power of big government. And we must focus a light on that. We can do that publicly, and we will gather the consensus around, wait a minute, this is just too much. We're going to reduce that size, that cost, and that power, and it's going to be done by libertarians.
It's an excellent segue into really the fundamentals of your background. You come from a strong military background. As I mentioned, you were an attorney, and you also became, I believe, a judge advocate, a JAG, as they say. Oh,
yes, that's correct. I was in the JAG Corps in the Navy.
Okay, so let's talk about your background in the war on drugs, because in conversations we've had in the past, you've served as a private attorney, you've served as an attorney in the military, you've served as an attorney in the form of a judgeship at the most basic level, and then you've moved rapidly up, if you will, into a county-wide judgeship in a state like California, which is literally the size of some states, and you were the chief judge. So you've seen firsthand the impact of the war on drugs. What was your initial contact with it as someone who comes from a military background, who might have had to evolve his position based on personal experiences? Tell us a little bit about your journey in the war against drugs.
Well, I first of all can tell you, I did a TED Talk on that one time, and if people are interested, you can go to judgejimgray.com and see the TED Talk, and that'll give more information than I can give here. But Pat, I was raised pretty much the same way that probably everyone, you and everyone listening was raised, that in effect equate heroin with bad, with evil, and with prison. I didn't think about it very much, but certainly it's not a good thing to be addicted to any of these drugs. So when I went into the military, I was pretty much a drug warrior. I was a staff judge advocate, which meant I filled out some charge sheets against our fellow seamen. I was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Guam, and I was also additional duty criminal defense attorney and defended numbers of my shipmates charged with drug offenses. Didn't really think much about it. Then I went into the United States Attorney's Office. I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, actually held the record for a short time for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California, which was at that time 75 kilos of heroin, about 165 pounds, which was and is a whole lot of heroin. What's the record now, by the way, you might ask? And the answer is 17 tons of cocaine in one place. So you can tell how much progress we're making. But I didn't really think about it much then either. It was only when I was on the bench. I took the bench in the end of 1983, and you just start watching, Pat, in your own courtroom, where we're churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no particular benefit. We're harming people's lives in many ways. And by the way, we're taking away a lot of prosecutorial resources from the prosecution of robbery, rape, and murder. So I started looking, started noticing, started reading articles, started keeping notes. And finally, back in 1992, I did something enormously unusual for a sitting trial court judge. And I held a press conference. And I stated to anyone that would listen, the failure of the war on drugs is imminent. Drug prohibition doesn't work. We must put our heads together and come up with something different. And by the way, we couldn't do any worse if we tried. So anything we would do would be better than this. The United States of America leads the world in people in custody. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners. And actually, as U.S. Senator Jim Webb, he retired but from Virginia, once said when confronted with those statistics, either we're the most criminally oriented people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? And of course, the answer to that is obvious. President Reagan, 1980s, ratcheted up the war on drugs. And what happened? Well, we started increasing the size of our prisons. And by the way, by 1990, we were only half as successful in prosecuting homicides as we had been in 1980 because we diverted so many resources to the prosecution of drugs. So I simply couldn't keep quiet. I felt, Pat, actually that some things were more important than job security. I actually got away with it. I was able to continue with my job. I didn't know if somebody would run against me, they would impeach me. I just didn't know. But it was so important. I felt who better than a pretty conservative judge in a conservative county who's never used any form of the illicit substances. At least they have to listen to the discussion, and by and large, it's been pretty successful. I also know, I'll finish this in a moment, I said at the time in 1992 that by the year 2000, we will have a materially different drug policy in our country, and I guaranteed it, and boy, was I wrong. You know, we're now in 2020, and in many ways, we're so much worse off than we were back then, but we're making progress, and libertarians have led the way, and we should take credit for that. If not, we should take a bow, because it's been our issue, and people are finally beginning to see it. Let's capitalize on that and take that into other issues, because there are a lot more out there.
If you become the libertarian
Other than that, I have no opinion whatsoever.
If you become the libertarian nominee, there is going to be a not so ironic, potentially awkward moment when you are sitting across the desk, if you will, from a guy named Joe Biden. And the betting lines have it at pretty good odds that Mr. Sharp, if nominated, will be sitting across the table at one moment or another from Kamala Harris. I can't think of, in recent American history, two bigger architects, two bigger, if you will, warriors that carried literally the sword in the war on drugs than Joe Biden, and then through her service to the state of California, and I use that term loosely, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden, we look upon him now as, crazy Uncle Joe, that sort of silver-haired, dapper figure, amuses us with his bon mots, his cliches, his malapropisms. He truly resembles that remark, if you will. Dating myself a little here. What would you say to Joe Biden, given the opportunity, whether it be across a debate table or across maybe the gulf of the media in America? Someone who literally has created this hell.
My fellow Americans, we need someone who will stand up for what is right, who will see what it is and will take action, even if sometimes it is unpopular. Not the political thing to do, but the right thing to do. And we as libertarians, and I'm proud Larry Sharp will be my running mate, we will stand up and tell you the truth. For example, just in this pandemic that we've had with the coronavirus, and I expect we'll talk about that, our government has not been telling us the truth. Our government was not prepared. One function of the federal government is to prepare, to plan for possible emergencies. Of course, they didn't know when, they didn't know what, they didn't know where, but they weren't flat-footed. They flat out failed us. We will plan. We will take what is necessary for the federal government, which is, yes, a military, yes, a court system. You want to know what's necessary for the federal government? It's called the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 outlines what powers are delegated by the Constitution to the federal government. Not schools, not healthcare, but yes, to be prepared for the general welfare of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, they have failed us. We will, in effect, make those plans and keep us much safer.
The federal government has failed us on so many levels. And it's interesting, when I raised that question here in New England, folks say to me, well, you're a libertarian. Why would you make that argument? Well, the federal government effectively took the air out of the room for anyone who had a different approach to, if I could use the term loosely, governing. The federal government decided that they would essentially hijack so many of the systems that were in place to respond to a quote-unquote natural disaster like this. They would hijack the mechanism and the bureaucracies which would control the distribution of medical care, whether it be through the FDA or a host of business regulations that created monopolies, or regional monopolies, if you will, for people in the medical industry, and eliminating free market competition. As a president, or particularly as a presidential candidate who's running during immensely challenging times, what message do you want to deliver to the American people about the responsibility of states to respond to these crises versus the failures of these overarching medical bureaucracies that have been put in place by a government hopelessly out of control at the federal level?
Well, let me count the ways. The first thing, I actually host a podcast as well. It's called All Rise, The Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. And I hosted Ken Armstrong, who is running for president, the nomination for the Libertarian Party. And actually, when he was working for the Port Authority of Los Angeles, was in charge of planning for emergencies. And he had all kinds of plans, and he was all well equipped. And about 3 years thereafter, there was an earthquake in Los Angeles, and what he had planned worked very well. I commend him. Those are things that the federal government can and should do. On the other hand, the federal government is not empowered to close down businesses. It is not empowered to order people not to walk around, etc. There's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the president or the federal government to do that. That would be up to the states. Hey, let's look at the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution. That's what they say. They will again find force. And by the way, Pat, I haven't seen any particular Supreme Court cases in my memory that actually enforce the 9th or the 10th Amendments. That's got to change as well. So we have to see what works and what doesn't. And in this recent pandemic, we've heard our president say, I'm the president, I get the last authority on everything. Well, he hasn't read the Constitution either. This man before you, Judge Jim Gray, has.
Specific departments. Now, we talk about repeatedly here on this show about what we call the 3 as opposed to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And let me break it down. In effect, at the state level, you've got individual state governments creating a fiefdom within the medical industry through the weapons, if you will, of certificate of needs. And also the second horseman would be, of course, cross-state licensing of medical professionalism. What are your comments on those abominations? Because they've clearly impacted our ability as a society, as an economy, as a government, as a people to respond to the corona crisis. What are your thoughts on those two issues?
These things have been in so many ways caused by our federal government. Let's go to the FDA, which, by the way, the private sector, when they finally understood, and by the way, let's also say that China withheld this information for much too long, and that caused some of the problems too. But when finally the government realized it, the private sector was out there ready to make masks, ready to make ventilators, ready to help, ready to look for possible inoculations or antibodies and the rest. And it was the FDA that kept them from doing it. And it was the federal government that kept the various companies from being able to manufacture these things that were needed because, oh, the bureaucracy, you haven't taken out a license, etc. So the government is the problem. And the huge thing, Pat, is the political response we have seen is for politics, if you're elected office, if I do the maximum to shut down the economy, to protect your health, I'm going to be successful politically. So if you did not get sick, if you're healthy, then you're going to say, wow, Gray really did a great job. I'm going to get political plaudits. And if I do everything to overdo shutting down the economy and you do get sick, at least I have the defense. I did everything I could. Well, that's the political way, but it's a cowardly way because, as I've written, as I've said numbers of times, the businesses, the economy was not even a part of the conversation. It wasn't a part of the equation. We need a balance. So look, we have someone here, a company in Southern California called Sit and Sleep, and they're they manufacture and sell mattresses. And one of their managers was complaining legitimately, look, I have a business that is deemed not essential, so they closed me down. But you can go to Costco, which is, of course, a big box store, and people, if they want to walk around there, yes, they can get groceries, but they can also buy mattresses. And so you are helping my competitor, and you're closing me down. It's simply flat out wrong. What do you do instead? What would libertarians do, Pat? You know as well as I. Allow Sit and Sleep or mattress companies or hardware stores to advertise, saying, look, we're going to disinfect our stores every 3 hours, whatever they do. We're going to make sure that we keep distances of 6 to 10 feet. We're going to protect our employees. We're going to protect our customers. We're going to only allow 10 people in the store, whatever, at the same time. We're going to take their temperature before they come in, whatever, and then allow us as adults to choose whether we're going to go into those stores as customers or not. That will be the libertarian way. That's the smart way, and we're going to wreak havoc with regard to our economy because of what the various governments have done in shutting us down, and it's going to be disastrous in effect. That is something that we as libertarians understand, and the rest of the United States is going to understand pretty soon, and to their sorrow.
It's fascinating because at this moment in time, and I've had this conversation with a number of libertarians, we, because of the internet and because of technology gains, are in a unique position to self-regulate as opposed to government insistence on regulation. And the point I'd like to make is that very often of any one of a number of organizations, for and not for profit, that have arisen using the internet as a means of dissemination of information, are able to provide data, opinions, responses about the performance of individual products well before the government is able to even understand that those products exist. Are we ready as a society to move to a self-regulatory model? Has the pendulum tipped so far that the government now has become, let's be blunt, in the wake of the coronavirus, an agency of death, as opposed to an agency that morally and legitimately and somewhat maturely interprets risk for Americans?
Pat, I think this coronavirus epidemic is going to hit people in the face, and they will understand what you just said. It's clear to us libertarians, but government is not our friend. Government is there too. Like Milton Friedman said, why are these angels of government going to be the ones that come in? They have their weaknesses, their desires as well. Yes, I think that people will understand that if we treat adults as adults, we provide honest, timely information into the marketplace promptly, and then allow adults to make independent decisions. No one wants to get sick. Treat adults as adults, and they will start acting as adults. And we libertarians understand that, and I think that that will be supremely increased because of this experience.
If you're just joining us, Judge Jim Gray has joined the coalition. This week and next week, we're going to be hosting a variety of candidates for the Libertarian nomination for the President of the United States. We thank you for joining us. And if other candidates are out there that would like to participate, they need merely reach out to me, and we will find a way to schedule them in. Tomorrow night, I'd like to mention that on LPTV, and we'll be sharing links to this, from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, I will be the host through the Libertarian Party of something called An Hour with the Candidates, where we spend a half hour with two what we'll call down-ballot race candidates. Last week, we hosted two wonderful town council candidates from around the Libertarian nation and give them an opportunity to speak to you, to take advantage of digital technology, to speak to the country about what I call lunch pail issues through the perspective of a libertarian prism. It's been a lot of fun. We've done it for a couple of weeks, and tomorrow night we've got someone running for state rep, and we've got a congressional candidate. So I invite you to join us at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. You'll see postings all over the Libertarian social media. Judge Gray, and again, thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a variety of issues to go through, but if there's a single constant, there's a single common denominator, if you will, it's that libertarians don't seek to support, to enforce, to perpetuate, to perpetrate individual behavior, do they? We're all about presenting opportunities where adults can choose their own personal course. What's your thoughts about that?
Of course. As Benjamin Franklin said, we don't guarantee we don't guarantee opportunities. We just guarantee, you have to find them yourself. That we believe that individuals should be able to profit from their labors. And by the way, I think that we also understand that we are compassionate people, and if there's some people that need a hand voluntarily, we are many places going to give that. By the way, also, Pat, one thing that you just said, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but one strong thing about Judge Jim Gray and Larry Sharp running for president and vice presidential nominations are that we will be more supportive for down ballot candidates than any other team, I believe. We bring that with us. We bring that form of mainstreamness that will be able to help people on the down ballot ticket. And so I'm proud of that. But responsibility is key. And it was Milton Friedman one time that also said, you get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax. Right now, we are taxing success and subsidizing laziness and people crying out as victimization. We've got to change that. Not because we're powerful, not because we are haughty or even narcissistic, it's because we care about people. And if you want to see an example, the biggest one I can think of is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I quote Henry Ford with some frequency, not my favorite person in the world because I think he was anti-Semitic, but he said something everybody should be emblazoned on their foreheads, which is anyone that feels they can thrive by relying on the government should talk to the American Indian. It's really all you have to say, because look what that reliance for 240 years, some odd, has done for them. If you live on the reservation, your children are going to be taught by the government, not by you. You're not going to be able to own your own home. Why? Oh, we'll take care of you. Don't worry about that. Well, if you can't own your own home, you have no interest in fixing it up. And if you go on some of these Indian reservation Native Americans, you'll see that they're pretty much plain vanilla. And if you want to start a business, you can't get a mortgage on your home to get the seed money to start your business because you don't own it. It's all due to the government. One thing I would do promptly if I could is spread the word, shine a light on what's going on in the BIA, which, by the way, the Indians call bossing Indians around, and abolish it. It's just time. It is not something that we should still be doing. And to finish that thought, okay, when the Irish came over here, they had a reputation supposedly of drinking too much, etc. So what? We should have had a Bureau of Irish Affairs, don't you think, Pat? Well, okay, I don't think so. The Irish have done very well. Thank you very much. It's the same thing with the Native Americans. You treat them as adults and they will start being successful. These are just things that people have not thought of, and it goes on and on. Going back to the sunset provisions, the Department of Education. Pat, I'm older probably than most people listening here in some ways, but I was raised in public schools in the 1950s, 1960s, and they were really pretty good. Then we get the Jimmy Carter administration that puts in the Department of Education, and then the federal government more and more controls what's going on. Teach for the test, no child left behind, all of the rest of this, and the things keep getting worse and worse. We must look at school choice. Again, a Milton Friedman idea that you empower the parents to choose where their government money is going to be spent for the education of their children. And then you know what's going to happen? They're going to demand excellence. And you know what else will happen? They're going to receive it. And actually, it was embarrassing. When in 2012, I was running for vice president nomination with Governor Gary Johnson, and I found myself in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I started talking about this, and people started shaking their fingers at me, saying, well, wait a minute, Judge Gray. We've had school choice now for 6 or 7 years. We don't have any bad schools anymore. They either got better or they went out of business and were replaced by someone else. Competition works. It works for your cell phone. It works for our microphones we're talking into, and it works for education. Bring competition back to education, and everyone will win except the poor teachers. The teachers that can't teach. But we must make a decision, Pat, hugely important in our campaign, hugely important for our people. What is the purpose for our educational system? Number one, to educate our children. What a concept. Or number two, to protect below average teachers. And guess what we're doing today? Because good teachers will thrive. They'll be able to teach as they wish, as they know how, and they'll be in competition. If your school district isn't paying this good teacher enough, they may be lured over to my school district, so they will be paid what they're worth. It goes on, but that's a huge issue that I'd love to discuss more if you like.
No, absolutely. I was under the impression that students were just sort of a necessary evil in order to justify the existence of what I call the educational infrastructure industry. That's what I thought. I thought kids were they were just there to kind of take up seats so that we could argue about pensions and we could argue about job protection. I'm with you 100% on that. I often wonder why. And by full disclosure, my wife is a teacher. She teaches in the dreaded private sector. In just about every industry in America, there are headhunters. If you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're a geologist, if you're an engineer, there is an entire crew of people out there looking to give their siren song to whisk you away from your existing job into something that might be more lucrative. That doesn't exist in teaching because teaching is essentially price fixing. And that what happens to any good service commodity when you fix the price, you lose quality, you lose competition, you lose the ability to recruit folks who are the very best. And so one of my favorite hashtags is end public education. And that's the kind of spirit we need. We need to politely, persuasively, authoritatively bring to Americans some real choices for once. And one of them is clearly education. What approach would you take? Let's go down that road. What approach would you take in terms of migrating students away from these stilted, failed systems into another alternative?
Well, you allow that school choice. If you could, and the word is empower parents to choose where their government money would be spent. They know their children. They know what is best for them. And it isn't Washington. It's not, in my case, California. It's not Sacramento. It's the parents. And who is in a better position to decide where and how your child should be raised and educated? You or the government? I've asked that question 1,500 times probably. Never has anyone said it's the government. It's always the parents. So you bring that empowerment to the parents, then they will understand. Maybe our child really doesn't want to be a professor of economics or a medical doctor or a surgeon. So maybe that child wants to be an airplane mechanic. Then they can go to vocational schools, which is a wonderful idea. Give people a skill, they can then take care of themselves. They can protect themselves. It's working really well in Germany. We don't do that at all in our country until they get into maybe junior college or beyond. Allow the parents to decide if their child would really want to go to a vocational school to be able to be a mechanic, to be a plumber, etc. That would be a good thing. parents, the more local the educational system is, the better. Last thought is, if you go to any public school today, the better teachers are not dumb, and they realize there's more money in administration than there is in being a teacher. So they gravitate out of the classrooms and end up in administration. And we are top heavy in administration in almost all public schools, with the better teachers there getting more of the money, and of course, sending back and forth information to the federal government and the state government. But in private schools, in even charter schools, you have much less administrative people and more good teachers in the classrooms. It's just a question of choice. It's a question of competition, and it's a huge issue. Last comment, Pat, because I wrote what was an op-ed piece, and I submitted it to the LA Times, Los Angeles Times, to actually the Orange County Register, and even others. And it said an open letter to the ACLU, MALDEF, and the NAACP. If you look at one of the tragedies in the world today, in our country, it's the failing schools. And most of the time, they're in the lower economic areas, mostly then, regretfully, inhabited by African Americans, Hispanics, and other minorities. Those are your constituents. By and large, you stand for trying to help the down and out, the lower people. Why are you not taking a stand and leading the charge in favor of school choice, so that the children in these areas will actually be able to reach their potential? Because if they have poor schools, they probably never will stand much of a chance of doing that. The ACLU and the NAACP and MALDEF should be leading the charge for private school, for school choice. Somehow or other, I've not been able to get that published yet, but I'm still trying.
Well, send it over to here. We'll publish it here at the coalition. You know, it's, and I'll answer to you that the duopoly, if you will, practices a form of economic racism that can best be described as advocating for the soft bigotry of diminished expectations. That's a mouthful, but ultimately what they are guaranteeing is this sort of perverted loyalty by a community who's desperately trying to climb the economic ladder here in the United States, all right, by ensuring sort of this status quo, this failed public model, because of the fear-mongering presented by folks in that educational industry, that your children will be left on the side. These libertarian types, these free market types, you know, what will happen to the children? And the reality is, and I cited this the other day when we had another candidate on, in the state of Arizona, which has been incredibly aggressive on a number of levels, thanks in part to our friends at the Goldwater Institute, they've created something called educational scholarship accounts for a variety of districts within Arizona. It's not statewide yet, but in that model, and I believe this is a way to start that migration, in that model, they present monies, much like a health savings account, where instead of taking courses at a local school, they give you the money to spend elsewhere. Interestingly, to your point about the Indian nation, it's been in place long enough now they've been able to analyze the results, and amazingly, here's a shocker, the biggest response, the biggest success has been in Native American populations, where scores have increased exponentially, college attendance has risen, vocational education has risen. We have single-handedly, by employing one libertarian technique, changed lives across Indian reservations and sovereign nations across Arizona. It's literally just a case of break glass, add water, and all of a sudden lives are changed. You know,
it's true, Pat. It's a crime. I mean, it's just flat out a crime to do this. The crime of low expectations, the crime of, oh, poor baby, you're not going to be able to do this. Again, I quote Milton Friedman, who's truly a hero of mine. And he says if this would be a revolution in our government today, we should judge our programs by the results, not their good intentions. And if we could just get that, folks, across that, oh, good intentions, oh, the minimum wage, oh, poor baby, you need a working wage. Well, you understand it is far better for a society, for example, to have 100 people working at $10 an hour than 65 people working at $15 an hour. You can't get up the economic ladder unless you get on the first rung. Now, I know it sounds good and you're going to be politically benefited by saying, oh, poor baby, we're going to give you $15 an hour. But candidly, Pat, some people are not worth $15 an hour yet. They will be once they learn a work ethic and get started. But if they can't get that first job, it won't be working. So you can test that by going to pretty much any McDonald's now, where we used to order our Big Macs or whatever on face-to-face with a clerk. Now you do it on a computer because they price the clerks out of the market. It just doesn't work. And the libertarians understand that. It's not crass, it's not greedy, it's reality. And then I would combine that with the safety net that you can talk about if you want to, but there is a much better way to have people be able to be responsible and work, have a contract where I will come to you, McDonald's, and work for $10 an hour so that I can learn the trade or whatever. You have government interference in the marketplace, just like we did with this pandemic, by the way, and it simply flat out doesn't work. But politically, oh, I'm there to protect you. It sounds good politically, so I keep getting elected by doing it. But as a practical matter, we're failing our people.
Well, and that brings up, I think, the issue of the day. And of course, it's the pandemic, and obviously there's a rat's nest of issues surrounding it. But let's first go for the low-hanging fruit based on our conversation just now about minimum wages. Ironically, and I find sort of a dark humor in this, Republican leadership, both at the House and at the executive branch, have just engaged, even prior to the pandemic, in a pattern of behavior which, quite frankly, would make Barack Obama blush a couple years ago. Remember that the Tea Party was an outgrowth of federal deficits. It was an outgrowth of federal economic favoritism, cronyism. It was an outgrowth of a lack of control over the federal government's intrusion into private lives. Now, before the pandemic, you had, I called it the stealth quantitative easing. You had the President of the United States essentially pushing for massive cash injections into the stock market. This was in the fourth quarter of last year, because remember, for all libertarians, it's my 401k, because that would be the response. Every time you would meet a fan of the orange Cheeto, it would be, well, look at your 401k. And then you try to explain to them that the 401k was fiction. It was that, left-wing publications like Barron's and CNBC had pointed out that the correlation in stock price increases was directly connected to the increase in money being pumped into the economy by the federal government. All right, so and then we get on to the response this week to the pandemic. For the love of God, we know what kind of debt level we just burdened our great-grandchildren with, but what is your response as someone who clearly believes in market economics? And how does your response jive with what the duopoly just foisted upon us for future generations?
Politically, it makes sense. It looks like they're caring, and the rest, you go back to this $2.2 trillion, gift of money. When it comes down to it, it sounds really good, I'm doing something. By the way, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had Dean Rusk, who was not known for his sense of humor, and they were in a White House meeting, and he all of a sudden chimed in, don't just do something, stand there. I always thought that was really rather clever, but we should, in effect, do the same thing. But Congress and the president need to show the people that they're doing something. What do they do best? Spend money. And so they are throwing money everywhere. Okay, if you look at that $2.2 trillion spending, some of that, I think it was $15 million, went to the Kennedy Center. And somebody was questioning, well, why should the Kennedy Center theater get this money? And they said, well, the Kennedy Center has been really hurt by this, which is, of course, true. But what about the other theaters? They're the cronies. They're the ones that get the money. What about all the other theaters in the world? You can't keep doing this. We've got to stop spending this money. And like you said, Pat, accurately, it's going to be our children and our grandchildren that are going to really be hit by this. We can get into a recession. They're going to have to pay it back. If our monetary system goes, I was the chair of the World Affairs Council in Orange County, and we had one time we have people come in and speak about world policy. We had former Ambassador John Negroponte, who was a really good man, been an ambassador 3 times. And at the end, we asked him, the first question we asked him was, Mr. Ambassador, what is the biggest security threat to the United States of America today? And without batting an eye, he said, it's the deficit. Who is talking about the deficit? Certainly not the present administration, which is trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. It's only the libertarians that are doing this because it's the safety for our country. We are the only political party in the mainstream of American political thought today. The Democrats and Republicans are pretty much the same. They just want to take more money and spend it. We are responsible. We are live and let live, and we treat people with dignity. I'm proud to be a libertarian, and by the way, you didn't say this, but I was a lifelong Republican until the year 2001 when they passed the so-called Patriot Act, and I could not, in any conscience, be a part of any organization who would condone, much less assist, this direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. And it took me, I still remember, Pat, it took me 13 seconds to realize I really am a libertarian, and I will be for life, because we are the only mainstream party, and I'm proud of that party.
I'm going to give you a multi-parter here. This past week, I'm sorry, I can't resist, because I know some of my Republican friends will listen. But President Cheeto decided to announce to great fanfare and with an astonishing level of pride that he had just negotiated a solution with the Saudi Arabians and the Russians to limit, if you will, the supply or to cut back on the production of oil so that, in a sense, we could foster a price increase. Simultaneously, it would seem that he is trial ballooning the notion of paying oil riggers to not work, in a sense, taking the FDA and putting it on steroids. To your point, of course, that this is, this is politicking, this is buying votes, this is victimizing the whole thing. But talk about both, the economics of that, and I think the issue that ties in everything that we've discussed for the last 20 minutes or so, which is eliminating the moral hazard to failure in the marketplace. And so what's your thoughts on that treaty, or that relationship, as I say? It's not really a treaty, but that little body of work that Mr. Trump put together. And is anyone allowed to fail in this economy? Isn't that a primary function, a cleansing function of the free market? What say you?
Let me give you a story first, and then I'll answer your question more directly. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that when Chairman Mao Zedong was in charge of China, he saw that, my goodness, we have all of these sparrows. They're eating our fruit. They're eating our vegetables before they're ripe. So we're going to declare war on sparrows. The government declared a war in China on sparrows, and it was successful. They obliterated the sparrows. And you know what happened? They had an insect infestation like you will never believe. They lost all kinds of food. 1 million people starved to death. The answer to this is you do not have the government interfering in the marketplace. Now, there's some things, child labor laws, safety laws, that sort of thing, fine. But you do not have the government interfering. To have our president negotiating the price of oil is simply doomed to failure. Now, of course, he's not responsible for economy, or he's not responsible for business and prices there and gains. It's only politics. So he has to look like he's doing something positive, like this tariff, the trade war and tariffs, which has decimated so many people. The trade war and tariffs, oh, wait a minute, we're have these tariffs now with China. So, oh, wait a minute, the corn farmers, they're going to lose out because they're not going to be able to export their corn. So we're going to subsidize them. Okay. What about the wheat farmers? Oh, they didn't get the subsidy. You choose who's going to get the largesse, who we're going to give our money to, and it's all political. Keep the government out of these decisions. It has no business in these decisions. The free enterprise system will do very much. Thank you very much, Pat. And we've got to keep the government at bay.
We've got a situation now where literally farmers who have run up against the wall against tariffs, which are a tax on Americans, by the way, are being subsidized with money that we borrowed from the very people that we're placing tariffs on. Wow.
That's right. Well, and to some degree, that's good, because China does not want to torpedo our economy, because they'll lose a lot of dollars that they have loaned to us. But it's just amazing. We're tinkering with things that we should not be tinkering with.
Right, because ultimately, the Bernie Bros, as I mentioned last night, folks will see sort of. In fairness, I'm approaching certain issues with similar questions to all the candidates, but the Bernie Bros, the Bernie Dems, the Bernie whatevers have been screaming now for a year or so for universal free education, universal relief of student loans, and of course, free health care for everyone, Medicaid for all. And when economists pointed out that it would cost $1 to $1.5 trillion, of course, that everyone at that moment in time, at least at some level, sunk the idea. Bernie started to fade in the election. And that supposedly was that. to a certain degree, at least on a philosophical level, they are rightly pointing out that we just wrote $2 trillion worth of checks for private industry. So if we can do that and the economy can allegedly support it, as it's being claimed by the Republican Congress and allegedly a Republican president, who, of course, the Liberty Republicans would tell you believes in small government. All right, why can't we
Those days are gone.
Why can't we write the $1 million, $1 trillion check, quadrillion dollar check for free education? I mean, they've almost got a moral right to ask that question. If Delta Airlines can get how many billions of dollars, why can't some kids get off on their student loans? I'm not sure what to say to them at that point because, again, there are no longer any moral hazards left to being bailed out. Everybody's too big to fail.
Well, there's so much to talk about in that regard. You say Delta Airlines. Let's go to the TSA, by the way, quickly. It wasn't your question, but Delta Airlines does not want anybody to sabotage their planes, to have their planes falling out of the sky. They want to be safe. So you allow them to do the security, or American or these other airlines take over the security. They'll be much more user-friendly, and they'll also be more effective, and they'll also be less expensive. You get into this education issue where all these people are saying, oh, we should pardon the student debt. Oh, the student debt is so high, etc. It's only fair, poor baby, it should be pardoned. Think about that. Pause and think about that. Now, what if I went to school and I was really careful and I worked to support myself, and no, I didn't go to the expensive private school. I went to a less expensive, maybe junior college for a while, and I was parsimonious and I was responsible. Are you going to reimburse me for those costs? No. No, what you're doing is reimbursing people who made poor decisions. And now you're going to make people that weren't fortunate enough to go to college, maybe they are an aircraft mechanic and they're working hard, they're paying their tax money to support those people who went to schools. Why should that happen? I mean, fairness has nothing to do with it. Pat, it's all politics. It's all pandering to the voters. It doesn't work. Does that sound harsh? Does that sound uncaring? Again, I was in the Peace Corps. I care about people. And the best thing you can do for someone is to show them that if you work hard, you will be able to benefit from your own labor and be responsible. You treat people as adults, they will start acting as adults. That's really important. Another thing before I don't know how much time we have. I can probably outlast you, but
no, that's if anyone's listening to this show, that's a challenge. We can. I have cleared the decks. We're going to be open for talk radio call-ins afterwards, but we can do this as long as you like.
That was a pretty narcissistic comment you made there, Pat. But one thing I would like to throw into this mix. It was President Reagan. He tried and he failed on this. The President of the United States should have a line item veto. You know, the Congress keeps throwing all of this pork into all of these must-pass legislations, and then the president, if in fact he or she wants to, is not able to veto individuals, so they have to decide, yes, I really want to keep the military bases open, so I'll allow these extra subsidizations for farmers or whatever. We should publicly say, it's a matter of responsibility for us and our children that the president should be able to have a line item veto. That is certainly one thing that I will campaign for.
No, I agree with you completely. My first response, it's been advocated here in Rhode Island. Rhode Island, of course, is, I like to say, a Soviet workers' paradise, a petri dish of failed socialism. We might test the constitutional boundaries here. For folks not from Rhode Island, understand that Rhode Island has been reduced in the last 2 or 3 weeks, after just 2 weeks of this crisis, to going to short-term money market, if you will, lenders to literally make payroll. That's how failed we are out here as a government. But I just, to your entire this section of the conversation, I'll just throw at you one of the mantras of the coalition, and that is that free market capitalism is the mechanism by which the individual can reach their full human potential. That's one of our statements of being, if you will, here. You
profit by your labors, you profit by your industry, you profit by your creativity. And of course, that's what works. By the way, in California, I was in Newport, Rhode Island, by the way, at the naval station there, and it was during the wintertime, and I loved it, even in the wintertime. But in California, as an example, we have the governor who says, okay, we're going to allow somebody renting forgiveness or at least delaying rent for 3 months. You're not gonna be forced out. In fact, we're gonna stop the courts from allowing any evictions. Well, now wait a minute. What happens then? Okay, 3 months from now, the renter is not going to be able to have the money. They're going to always be behind. What happens to the poor landlord? A lot of them are small. They need the rent money to make their mortgage payments. So you're going to put them out of business. It's tinkering with it. And I told you that I was the chair of the World Affairs Council here in Orange County, where we have been precluded from having any events. So we're not making any money. So what did I do? I went to the landlord. Our rent was in our little office building, not big, $2,308 a month. And I said, look, at the end of our rent lease, we will have to we'll have to leave, or if you wish, we'll renegotiate that rent. We'll pay you $1,000 a month for the next 8 months. And after that, once the economy rebounds, we'll renegotiate. It's a lot better for the landlord to get like 40% of something than 100% of nothing. So they were happy enough. We worked it out and we reduced that rent. If you get the government out of it, that's what's going to happen, Pat. You know, the landlords don't want to chase out good tenants, so they'll share the burden. They'll work with them. But if you have the government coming in with these meat cleavers, it causes all kinds of economic problems. Again, unintended consequences. Listen to Milton Friedman.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's safe to say that in a number of major American cities, they become what sociologists refer to as minority-majority cities. And clearly there are issues with school systems. There are issues with the basic delivery of fundamental services that the government charges for but may not deliver. And of course, housing stock is constantly an issue. The duopoly, Republicans and Democratic-led governments, constantly interfere with all of these processes at the direct disadvantage of those they purport to help. And let's do a little summary here. We've all seen the news video of folks at a variety of alternative educational opportunities in the inner cities where parents, many of them first-generation immigrants, some here legally, some here not. We'll talk about that in a minute. But literally in tears, waiting on these lotteries, these life-changing lotteries, so their child can get a legitimate education. We've all seen what happens when you have rent control. The worst thing that can ever happen to a first-generation immigrant, regardless of where they're from, who often go to cities for economic opportunity, is rent control. Because what happens? Less people get into the rental business. It destroys the housing stock. Prices, ironically, end up, forcing, if they can't go up, they force people out of the market, or they simply can't maintain their property. And the irony there is, in the inner city, very often the first step up the economic ladder are for folks who, right, you ready? First-generation immigrants who manage to buy housing and become landlords. So and the same thing with minimum wage. You're taking at a supermarket, for example, folks who work in the hood. All right, again, the employer still has the same budget. To your point, if they can hire more people at slightly lesser money, or if the price goes up, they hire less people, and if it goes up too much, they simply go out of business. So we sure helped them. Right. In order to save the village, we literally had to burn it. Now, if you're just joining us,
you certainly convinced me. Let's put it that way.
Folks, if you're just joining us, we're going to go long now because we still got a couple issues to go. We'll stay on as long as the judge wants to have a conversation. And again, that's the open invitation, literally, to every one of you who are running for office. If you're just joining us, Judge Jim Gray is joining us here at the Coalition. As we say at the top of every hour or close to it, we are the Coalition, loud and proud. We are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. We broadcast here on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. And we'd ask you, just as a favor, if you haven't liked our page, if you could, at facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. If you're a Twitter person, if you could follow us at Coalition_radio. And if you have a free moment during this shutdown, we're going to ask you two things. First of all, take a look at our site. We've got a civil liberties blog there where we post regular press releases and announcements from the ACLU and like organizations. But we're just going to announce just kind of an initiative that we're going to try and champion. And I say this carefully because, so many people try to make things go viral, and that never really works when you try to. So we're just going to gently put this out as a suggestion. Folks, we've all got a little bit extra time, maybe. A lot of us are, trying to find alternative forms of unemployment. Full disclosure, I'm unemployed. I'm on the government teat. I'm on the dole. I get that weekly electronic kiss in the mail now. But, I'm just going to introduce an idea. I'm just going to throw it out there quickly, and we're going to talk about it more tomorrow night. But I had a chance to speak with an activist in Texas, Becca Congdon. If you're familiar, she also does some work with the national office. And she mentioned that she was using this time because the convention looks like it's in danger, that she's going to reach out to, and she's been taking some time every week to meet new libertarian people that are new to her. She's been in the movement for a few years, and I thought, wow, that's a hell of an idea. Let's do that. So I'm just going to ask everybody, and again, I don't think it's going to become a thing, but just for our own personal benefit, our own self-growth as libertarians, I'm asking people over the next few weeks, maybe once a week, if you've seen someone on the web, you might be Facebook friends with them or not, that you've admired their work or you're intrigued by what they're doing as a libertarian. They could be in a down ballot race. They could be one of those behind-the-scenes people. Maybe it's someone at the LNC that you admire their work. I always mention Erin Adams. I always tell you that she's an astonishing activist, as well as an astonishing individual. Maybe you just never had a chance to talk to her. I'm asking folks, and we're calling it, because you got to have a hashtag here in the new millennium for it to be real, right? No hashtag, it can't be worth anything. So I'm calling it hashtag never met. And I'm asking people once a week to just reach out. Maybe even you ready for this, folks? Jim, you and I can appreciate this. Have a telephone conversation. Wow, not a Facebook chat.
Horrors.
but give them a call and talk for a few minutes. Pick up a few tips, exchange ideas. That's one of the great things about the Libertarian National Convention is that, as I say in my little tome here, the social media profiles become real faces and real people. Sometimes the people that you've argued with bitterly, because you meet them at the convention, you actually have a chance to have a conversation, right, Jim? Where you talk to them, all of a sudden become fast friends. It's happened to me. So everybody who listened to this or within the sound of what we do here at the Coalition, for the next 4 or 5 weeks, maybe hopefully this will end sooner, but as this continues, just reach out to somebody new every week. Get to know them in the movement. Maybe someone new, someone who agrees issues you may agree or disagree with. But take a chance, and if you meet someone and you have a conversation, let us know either at the Coalition Facebook page or my personal page, and just let us know how it went. And if you come up with a project and a couple people comments, to quote the great Arlo Guthrie, we could be a revolution. And a lot of that is based on just normal human interaction. And a lot of us are feeling pretty isolated. So let this be an opportunity. I thought that was an outstanding idea, and I'm just going to ask everybody to do it. And I hope you do, and just let us know. We've got Judge Jim Gray here in studio, if you will, virtually through the miracle of Internet Protocol. First of all, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending so much time. I also want to thank you as a candidate, and I've said this to a number of candidates. Running for office as a libertarian is both one of the great adventures and great challenges in American political life. You're running as a third party. You have none of the advantages of incumbency or the duopoly. You have all the challenges associated with the barriers that are put up. It's a great sacrifice to your personal life, your family life. You will spend lots of your own money. You will do your best to fundraise in a highly challenging environment, perhaps the most ever, in an election. And here's the perverse nature of our election right now. There can be no doubt that this is the most important election in American history because of the events that we're going through right now. Nick Sarwark had it great 4 years ago. There was an appeal by the Republicans, if you will, to him to support the Republican candidate because this was the most important election in American history. And how many times had Nick heard that? And I have to get his quote, but it was great. This time, we're okay this time. Well, somehow, it's always been the most important election in American history. And this time, we've got great candidates, as we've always had, and we're going to go on our own. And somehow, the world will be okay. But this represents what economists will call an exogenous event, an exigent crisis that is like none other. 9/11, there was a finality to it. All right. It was horrific. I used to work in the World Trade Center. I lost personal friends that day. The company that I worked for, a greater part of my life lost 300 people. But there was a finality to that. This transcends that. So this is the most important election. And so to those candidates, whether it be for town council or the President of the United States and everyone in between. I salute you, because it makes it that much more difficult to take time away from your family. It makes it that much more challenging to find ways to campaign, to reach voters. Everything's on steroids now. Everything counts. Everything matters. So again, I thank you, and I thank all the candidates out there who are willing to take that extra step to introduce some level of sanity into the political discourse, which is so clearly deficient at this point. We've gone mad as a nation. And I get it, and I get the fact that this hasn't happened in our lifetime or even our nation's lifetime, but we've gone mad. And we, as in the people within the sound of this show and, this little show and the sound of libertarians everywhere, we need to step up and we need to do something. The time of sitting back and allowing events to follow their own course are clearly over. So, Jim, to you and all the candidates, I thank you greatly for this type of personal sacrifice. Let's talk. Go ahead, buddy.
First of all, you're welcome. It is an honor. It was truly an honor to be the Libertarian candidate with Governor Gary Johnson for vice president. I took that really seriously. As we say in our campaign now, we'll do you proud. I tried to do us proud. What you said there as well in your remarks is really good advice. For about the last 3 years, I've written a blog called 2 Paragraphs for Liberty, just trying to throw out different ideas and issues, telling people I don't have all the answers. In fact, if I find someone that has all the answers, I try to run away as fast as I can. But I can bring up issues we're grappling. Let's talk about them together, not yell at each other, not call each other names, but just discuss these issues, which we libertarians do, and I'm proud of that. The last thing is that Thomas Jefferson, again, said to us, cautioning us, we're going to have a bloody revolution every generation. Why? To keep the vested interests at bay. Well, fortunately, our Constitution does not make the revolution be bloody. But, Pat, how long has it been since we've had a political revolution in our country? What, since maybe the 1860s when the Republicans took over from the Whigs? And look at the vested interests since that time. We libertarians are going to be that revolution. It's going to change people's lives, particularly our children, and we will be a lot better off for it.
Yeah, I think it's time for at least one of these two parties to have their Whig moment, if you will. To be relegated to the dustbins of history, to become anecdotes, to become Jeopardy questions. It's time to happen. One of the great challenges facing this nation before COVID, and for all the unintended consequences of COVID, continues to happen, of course, is how we treat this nation immigration process. Now, I'm going to briefly paint a picture, and I love your reaction to this, because all of these issues that we talk about tonight are all interrelated. And a lot of these issues have been exacerbated by the war on drugs. And let me make the brief case for that, and I love your reaction. The war on drugs, what we've effectively done through the use of the prohibition model, if you will, is to create external market forces, we call them black markets sometimes, to create the product of our desire. During the Volstead Act, of course, in prohibition, liquor plants were destroyed, breweries were shut down, casks of really good beer were wasted, much to our horror. And the almost immediate result was the pop-up of organized crime in places like Chicago, we all know about, and alternative forms of the manufacture of said product. And of course, what we've come to expect of all the normal reactions, the product was terrible, it was unsafe, it allowed for the creation of a criminal element that to a certain degree still survives today. You achieved nothing in terms of quote-unquote social advancement because those who wanted alcohols could still get alcohol. So as a result, you created this vast public dilemma, this problem, you literally brought down almost completely our American judicial system as a result because of the corruption that ensued. Now, flash forward to 2020. We've got a prohibition model been put in place, in this case against all forms of drugs, anything as mild as cannabis to as potentially addictive as the opioids and heroin and methamphetamine and everything else. And again, the usual suspects showed up. We've got narco-terrorism. We've got illicit product laced with fentanyl killing Americans. It's had no impact whatsoever on your ability to get drugs of any type by people of any age or any background. It's increased dramatically the cost of our judicial system again. Police have become militarized to a degree never seen in this nation's history. The racial component has exploded in places like Ferguson and Staten Island and Baltimore and Chicago and endless cities across the nation because of the natural impact on the relationship between law enforcement in this country and the community, who are selectively preyed upon by initiatives like Stop and Frisk. And as a result, but the difference this time, and this is long answer to a short, or long wind up to a short question. The difference this time is that unlike, say, during the Volstead Act, and where liquor was produced in different parts of America and maybe to a little degree in Canada, we've effectively offshored our drug production. That which we have prohibited is largely no longer manufactured, grown, compiled, created in the United States. Instead, it's gone down to Central and Latin America. And everything that I just talked about, it not only happens in American inner cities, but now happens throughout Central and Latin America. And the results have been stunning. It's created a public health crisis, and clearly there are a number of nations which are generating a population that's fleeing to the United States for basic safeties. It's no longer a question of illegal immigration. It's a refugee crisis. So with that all as a backdrop, and I appreciate working through that with me, but with all that as a backdrop, what is your approach to immigration, and how do you feel about borders?
Well, first of all, I agree with what you just said and all of it. We have made illegal drugs so lucrative. In fact, they're worth more per ounce than gold. And we have resulted in violence. We have resulted in, sometimes we deport some gangsters, so they go back to Salvador or wherever. And then, of course, they don't stop their gangsterism. Now they're all organized and they create violence down there. And people are coming up here from Guatemala and from Salvador because of the violence caused by our drug money. In a lot of ways, I think that gives us a moral obligation to help those people that are doing this. With regard to the whole drug issue, and I've written a great deal about that, written a couple of books, etc. And there's also one for the Oregon Law Review that was called, who is coming out ahead with regard to our nation's policy of drug prohibition. And by the way, I don't say prohibition, I say either alcohol prohibition under the Volstead Act or drug prohibition, because it's the same thing. But the six groups that come out ahead are, first of all, of course, the Mexican drug lords. They're making billions of dollars a year, none of it taxed, and thank you very much. The second group are juvenile street gangs. And Pat, I would see this when I was on juvenile court, that the juvenile street gangs are using the sale of illegal drugs as a recruiting tool. Hey, you want to make some money? You'll never make as much money as you can by selling drugs, which is exactly what we do not want to have happen. The third group, like you were also saying, really is the police. They're coming out ahead. They're getting more money than ever before. I'm not pointing the finger at law enforcement. They're doing a far better job now than they've really ever done before. More arrests, more convictions, more greater seizures, etc. But they're still winning. The fourth group are actually the politicians that keep voting for get tough rules, and then we keep electing them on that, so they're coming out ahead. Of course, that's our fault for doing it, but that's what happens. The fifth group really is the private sector that makes money because of increased crime. People that sell burglar alarm equipment, things of that kind, they're coming out ahead. And then try this one, Pat. The sixth group of people that are coming out ahead because of drug prohibition are the terrorist organizations, pretty much all the way around the world. Osama bin Laden on down, most of them get primary source of funding from the sale of illegal drugs. Who's losing? Pretty much everybody else. But then to go back to and by the way, with regard to fentanyl, which is a true killer, as well as the crack cocaine epidemic, so-called, etc., you have Holland, where they regulated and controlled drugs. They don't have any fentanyl. They have quality control. They never had a crack cocaine problem in Holland because the powder cocaine, which would be regulated, would be less expensive, and they just didn't have these problems. So and immigration's a huge issue. And by the way, I was in the Peace Corps. I was in Costa Rica, Pueblo Bravo, Español, como la gente, and that. But I would have a really straightforward and fairly simple work visa program where if you want to come to America and you want to pursue the American dream and work and support yourself, bless you. And well, yes, we'll have a background check for criminal justice issue, mental health issue, terrorist sympathizers, that sort of thing. But then you can have a work visa. You can come over here and work for a living and you can support yourself. Fine. Then you can go back and forth across the border because you're here legally and you can get a driver's license and you can have insurance and the rest. You can bring your family, you can support them, that too, but no welfare attached. So this would not be any welfare, with the exception of course, if you're bleeding in the street, we're going to give you emergency medicine because we're compassionate people, and we will educate your children as well for a variety of reasons. That way, you're not going to need a wall, you're not going to have all of these problems, and you're going to be able to have people come here and work. And that's what they want to do. That's what our ancestors did, and that's what we should have as well.
If one gets past the emotion and the rhetoric and the what we call here, of course, outrage porn of the duopoly, both sides being equally culpable in this scare arena that they maintain. The folks who come to this nation, by and large, work hard, are looking for careers, are looking for lives for their family. The notion that American policy and Americans would create an atmosphere in their home countries that is so violent, so corrupt, because of our recreational habits is an obscenity. That we then turn around and shut the door on them. You know, and every time I've had this conversation with a candidate, I mention that, you know, Dan Fishman, Tom Mann, and I went on a kind of an adventure to Mexico earlier this year, and you know, it was at the height, the end of the height, if you will, the refugee crisis, when Trump essentially shut down the border and started inventing new ways to force people back to the terrorism that they were fleeing. We had the opportunity one day to go over into Mexico and talk to folks who were trying to get to the United States. And we interviewed this one group that was living essentially on the floor in a faded municipal building just about 2 or 3 miles from the border. And we asked them what they did for a living back in Cuba. Now, these folks had somehow gotten from Cuba to New Mexico, which is kind of a hike. I don't think they had the pedometers or anything else like that. I wonder how many steps it was, right? So they got in there, and we asked them what they did in Cuba. One was an engineer, one was a doctor, one was in construction, one was an electrician. Ordinary folks simply looking for an ordinary life. And quite frankly, we were the ones who had destroyed it. So I'm just not sure what to say to folks, you know, who just try. Again, the duopoly uses emotions and fear to pit us one against the other. And I love your reaction to this. There's always got to be the bogeyman. The history of American government, there has to be some evildoer that we have to be fighting. How do libertarians react to that?
Libertarians are the only political party I know of that do not want to benefit by being involved in government. They just want to set up an even playing field. They want people to be able to thrive by their own industry. They are also very compassionate people, etc. So we would have a smaller government. We would have our government treat people as individuals. We would treat people with respect and as partners. And by the way, you mentioned Cuba, and I just have to bring this in. I was in Cuba a while ago, and we kept Castro in operation, in my opinion, for years where he would not have been able to continue because of our boycott. In fact, when I was there back in the late 1990s, I saw a cruise ship, I think, come in from Brazil. I mean, we're still putting this boycott on a small island where we're the only ones doing it. By the way, I also noticed that their peso was valueless. They were using American dollars for their currency, which I thought was rather ironic. Same thing in Zimbabwe, by the way. But we should normalize relations with Cuba. And we should normalize relations with other countries in the world. We should trade with them. By the way, Pat, I expect you agree with this, that usually people do not shoot their customers. So if you're trading with people, China or otherwise, you're much less likely to be in armed conflict. You're going to be able to get along. We don't do that. We just don't do that with people. We treat them arrogantly. We don't treat them as partners. And we should treat people, in effect, much more like we treat our neighbors. And we are so polarized in our country today. And I have reasons, in my opinion, why we've become so polarized, but we certainly are. Pat, did you ever in your lifetime think that you would see the President of the United States about to give the State of the Union address decline to shake the hand of the Speaker of the House of Representatives? Did you ever think you'd see that? Did you ever in your lifetime think you would see the Speaker of the House at the end of the State of the Union address tear up the speech of the President? Libertarians don't do that. We treat each other with dignity and respect. Yes, we get involved in a lot of arguments. We have different views, all of the rest of that, and we pride ourselves on that. But we don't call each other names. We speak to each other and compare notes. Our government needs to do that. We need to be much more respectful, much more withdrawn, and much more less out of our economics. And we will do that. We don't gain by being involved with politics. And by the way, if I may, if people are interested, we're just putting our websites together, but it's Gray Sharp 2020. Gray is Gray, Sharp is SHARPE 2020. I think you'll like what you see. We make promises to you that we're going to treat you proud and we're going to do you proud, and we mean it.
Got a couple of questions from folks, so I promised them I would read them. Ken asked the question, in the current divisive political climate, how will you break through with a unifying message revolving around liberty?
Liberty is in our bones. Actually, Pat, you probably don't know this, but I have written a musical recently with two partners, and it's called Convention, The Birth of America. And so I have really been involved with the founders of our country. And I don't say founding fathers because there were a lot of women too, like Abigail Adams. And I tell you, those 55 talk about fighting and arguing and complaining. Each of them, they were all men, each of them to a man would tell you that the most important function of government was protecting our liberties and our freedoms from the encroachment of government. The second most important was our security. We've gotten away from that to the degree that I believe our founders would virtually take up arms against us. Liberty has made our country strong, and we must go back to that prospect. Again, I would have a safety net for those out of compassion, but we've gotten away from liberty. We have governments exceeding their authority all over the place. Just the income tax alone is so intrusive. It can learn everything about your finances. It's just simply wrong. We must trim these things back and go back to our roots. That has made us a great country.
Matthew.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. Matthew's got a question. Pat Ford, I hope you tackle the votes versus members strategy debate that coincides with the Prague versus radical debate. So I'll let you jump on that. I interpret that to be sort of a reflection on a little bit we discussed in the opening moments of the show. You've got folks who self-identify as pragmatic, who, and I'll give credit to both sides for as the show host. The pragmatics are worried about ballot access and a candidate that's viable, is in their words, and a candidate who is has greater name recognition. The radicals, and in full disclosure, I am involved. I am in the board of the Radical Caucus. Proud to be a radical libertarian. We spoke earlier about the notion, and let's be specific. A former candidate had an opportunity on a nationwide, actually an international television show, the likes of which libertarians rarely get. And I get emotional about this issue because I've had the good fortune now over the last, and particularly the last year, of meeting folks who are literally, you talk about the founding fathers and mothers, if you will, of the libertarian movement. I've met a couple of them now, and their commitment to our party has been astonishing. I often reflect that, in the 70s, these were the folks who were, two of them would march in a town parade and would then set up a table and booth, and they were met with very often derision and laughter and, who are you, what are you talking about? These are the folks who, we're here now, we're having this conversation now because of them. we would cease to exist as a party many times over the challenges, if you will, that they were able to overcome. So I am a radical, and some would call me a fundamentalist libertarian. But radicals cry out, if you will, and Mises people as well. They cry out for this return to unabashed libertarian virtues. So I'm kind of interpreting his question to be that. What are your thoughts on that? I know we covered a little bit, but I want to answer viewers' questions.
Well, Pat, I don't think that you have said anything since we've begun our discussion today that implies that you're a radical. And so I really don't go in for labels. It doesn't particularly help much. I don't deem myself to be radical. I deem myself to be a pragmatist, an incrementalist. And the reason for that is that if you can be pure, be philosophically pure, and I won't give in at all, that's fine for a debate society or a philosophy group. But as far as government is concerned, we're going to be in the same mess that we're in 10 years from now that we are today, or maybe even worse. But if you go toward incrementalism, we're going to be better off 10 years from now than we are today. People will see, hey, wait a minute, that really does work. I want more of that. And so you take smaller steps. We are the party of principle. I'm proud of that. We don't give in on our principles. I'm proud of that as well. But I would much prefer next year to be at least somewhat better off than we are today than be pure to my purism, if I can coin that word, and be in the same situation. So it's kind of both. But I am a pragmatist. I want to go with what works. Fortunately, what libertarians espouse works. So I'm not a purist. I'm just a pragmatist. That's why I'm a libertarian.
Okay. I'm just going to issue one gentle challenge, and take
your gloves off. Don't be gentle. Hit me with it.
The example I often use, I often refer to and to people use the term incrementalism is the devil, and the reason I say that is because of a life experience here in Rhode Island. Rhode Island was not the first, but amongst the first states in the nation to legalize the medicinal use, if you will, of cannabis. And in doing so, enacted a pretty well-articulated program that had been debated endlessly in state houses, as this often is, but came together with, I think, a fairly solid approach to it. It was responsible. It appeased government in the terms that you wouldn't have people wilding on the streets selling cannabis that was, gotten through an ill-gated card or any of that nonsense, none of the reefer madness stuff, all of that. And so that worked well for a few years until two things happened. Clearly, as a Rhode Islander, I want the absolute legalization of recreational cannabis. Hashtag treat it like a plant. And I'm not interested in it being taxed either whatsoever. Now, again, we're being realistic here. At best, I hope to move the window, the famous Overton window, somewhat, so that people don't, because I'm tired of people cheerleading, and I think you and I can agree on this, people cheerleading for, but the state needs the revenue, more revenue. No, the state doesn't need the revenue, and stop cheering for them, damn it. But a couple of things have happened. The primary obstacles, if you will, in Rhode Island to the legalization of cannabis are in part the very people who have established essentially monopolies through the legalization of medical cannabis. And so as a result, we inadvertently erected our own barrier to future legalization when at the time we thought almost naively that, okay, if people are behaved and they're solid citizens with this, then in a few years we can get it for everybody. And we'll argue about the taxes and probably have to work out something, but it's been years now and we haven't been able to get it. While simultaneously, here's the killer, all right? The current governor, who would have you believe she's the reincarnation of Mother Teresa at this point with her pearl clutching over COVID, on a number of occasions has had some success. We've fought it as libertarians. Other folks have joined us. There's a coalition out there. Have had success. Are you ready for this? Taxing medical cannabis. You won't get taxed on your Dr. Feelgood opioid prescription, but you'll get taxed on medical cannabis. And her demands were so outrageous that inevitably what happened was, of course, we had to negotiate. And she's getting some money from people who are desperately ill and desperately poor at this point. Their resources being exhausted by a grotesquely inflated medical bureaucracy as a result, of course, of the state. And so the challenge I face, and I'd love for you to address this, and we'll kind of, probably agree to disagree on this, but the challenge I face is that if I give in, that's why I constantly have the conversation. I don't talk about even charter schools or any of this. I just simply want to end public education. If I could figure out a place where we could put all these kids, and this whole COVID crisis, one of the unanticipated side impacts might be the realization that bricks and mortar schools are not as important as we think they are. All right, but that aside, if I could figure out a way to put these kids, when they close school in May, somewhere completely private, if the market already existed and a home existed for these places to get educated, all right, I'd say close the damn public schools June 1st, and let's sell them off. So I am a polite radical in the sense that I phrase it in probably I'm too wordy and I'm too verbose, but I put it out there. I want to end all of these now, and I just see us, unfortunately, if we take half measures, and maybe I'm a half empty kind of guy, I'm not sure, but if we take half measures, then the challenge is government by definition, and I think you know this possibly better than anyone, someone who served honorably as a judge, someone who walked, used their position in government to educate themselves as to the evils of government. I mean, that's quite frankly, as the kids would say, that's libertarian as F. I mean, that's great stuff. It takes someone highly principled to be part of an association or an organization, understand what's wrong and the potential evils, and rebel against them while still part of that. As we say in Jersey, where I come from, it takes stones to do that, and I give you all the credit in the world for that. I just worry is if the mission creep that is so like a tumor, the growth that takes place every time we beat it back, if we don't find some way to at least eradicate part of it, we will be, again, a few years forward, become victim to it again. But that's my thought.
Well, Pat, I will disagree. I think that I would disagree with your saying incrementalism is the devil. If we go back to California, which, by the way, was the first state in the country that actually authorized medical marijuana, hooray. Let me go back for a moment, too. I think that the federal government created a crime upon us all back in 1937 with the passage of the so-called Marijuana Tax Act. Among other things, it prohibited any form of research as to this, and there are definitely medical benefits for CBD oil and other parts. It has nothing to do with mind-altering properties, and that was a crime by the government. We still haven't recovered from that. But coming back on the subject, had we not been able to go incrementally, as you would say, toward medical marijuana in 1996 in California, we wouldn't then have regulated and controlled marijuana today. If you try the brick through the window approach, people get scared. And there are a lot of demagogues out there that will fan those flames of fear. We're seeing that all the time. So it has to be an incremental thing. And just because you have then medical marijuana or even recreational marijuana, and then it gets taxed, well, okay, but that's a different issue. California has overtaxed marijuana. By the way, marijuana has been the largest cash crop in the state of California for the last 20 years. Number two is grapes, by the way. So it's going to be here. Question is, you're going to have it legal or illegal, and people haven't quite realized that. So now we have legal marijuana, but they tax it so high that the black market is still thriving. Right. If California understood economics, they would realize if they would reduce the taxes by half, they'd probably get a third more revenue. But they're dense. But it's not incrementalism. If you do it your way with regard to let's close all public schools, 10 years from now, you're going to be in the same position as we are now. But if we go incrementally into charter schools, where some schools are here, some schools are there, people will see that and we will make progress. 10 years from now, we'll be in better shape. So I vote for the latter.
My first comment is I hear there are some amazing properties along the Russian River in terms of silt and growth potential. I've heard that.
They're beautiful properties. They're really, really beautiful. And by the way, there are a lot of nice marijuana plants out there too.
It's interesting.
Let me add one more thing, because in California we had a huge fire that ended up burning in Yosemite and the rest, and it was started, as we later found out, by some people that were actually illegally here from Mexico growing marijuana, and they tipped over some form of Bunsen burner or something. And of course, what did they do then? They ran away. Well, and of course, they were so far away from any roads that it took a long time to be able to go and fight the fire. It was caused by marijuana prohibition. If you regulate it and control it, I assure you that if you're raising wheat and you start a fire, you're going to stay there and try to knock out the flame. There's just so many bad things that have happened to our country, to our people, to the world because of drug prohibition. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, I think what you and I will agree on absolutely is that the simple act of legalizing drugs, that simple act will have an impact on so many aspects of American life virtually overnight. Maybe in terms of responding as we try to figure out a way to dig out and restart our world here after Corona, after COVID, maybe that step should be first and watch society reflower on so many different levels.
Yes.
Give the cities back to the people who live in the cities. Allow the police to occupy something of a moral role in our communities, as opposed to being put in the position of being overlords. Eliminate significant public health crises. Take the strain off of our immigration system, and allow folks who want to return back to their home countries, who are perfectly content to stay in their home countries, to live there safely and without the fear of American subsidized narcoterrorism. I said it.
Yes.
It is American subsidized narcoterrorism. All right. Your money is going to destroy villages all over
Yes.
Central and Latin America. Maybe if we did that, think of what am I being overly simplistic, Judge?
No, sir. No, what I say in publicly, talking to Kiwanis clubs, whatever, is that drug prohibition is the biggest failed policy in the history of our country, second only to slavery. And if you tell me what is important to you, I will show you to your satisfaction how whatever that is made worse because of our policy of drug prohibition. It's unbelievable. It's so, the more you look into it, like I have, I've written my book, why our drug laws have failed and what we can do about it, a judicial indictment of the war on drugs. And it was published in 2001. By the way, I'll put in a plug for myself because I'm proud of this. It was endorsed by Milton Friedman, by Walter Cronkite, by George Shultz, by Governor Gary Johnson, by Arianna Huffington, and by Mayor Schmoke from Baltimore. If I figured I could get those six to agree on anything, we were pretty much doing okay.
That's outstanding. Well, Judge, I want to give you some time to summarize and also engage in what we refer here at the Coalition as shameless self-promotion, which is something that we fully encourage, by the way. First of all, thank you for spending this much time with us this evening. I know this is probably a lot longer than you'd originally anticipated, but I
My
certainly,
pleasure.
I think the conversation was well worth it. We appreciate what you brought to the table tonight. If you had an opportunity, and let's just put yourself in the position, it's debate night. For the first time in history, we've gotten a libertarian into the presidential debate. And you're asked to summarize. You're looking out at the American nation. Maybe you're on CBS or ABC, and you're looking out to the American nation as Judge Jim Gray, candidate for the president of the United States from the Libertarian Party. What would you say to Americans?
My fellow Americans, we are in a healing process. We are divided. We are polarized unlike ever before. So we are going to put in a coalition government. We are going to put in a government certainly of libertarians and independents, but also Republicans and Democrats, as long as they agree with our philosophy of responsibility at all levels of society, including financial. That means individual, group, corporate, and governmental, as well as live and let live, a respect for each other, and don't tread on me, don't tread on anybody. So if we have a problem politically with the Republicans, we'll say, some of our comrades, go out, talk to your people. Let's discuss issues. Let's do this on merit. Let's not call each other names. Let's not go over our heads and lie to the American people and realize life is complicated, but we're going to help all of our people. We have some problems in our country. And one of them is that when we have our warriors and they're told to follow orders and go into Afghanistan or Iraq or Yemen or wherever, Kosovo, and fight, they salute, they say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and off they go. We have an absolute obligation to make sure that that is in our public interest, for our safety, for our national security interest, before we send them off into harm's way. Libertarians are going to follow the Constitution and require a declaration of war. Not because I, as president, won't be capable of doing that, but you look back to Vietnam, where we did not have a declaration of war. Eventually, the people realized they've been lied to, they were misled, and then they rebel. If we do this in Congress, we're going to debate what the goals are, what the end strategy is, who the enemy is, where they are, and how then, when we reach our goals, we will be able to get out. These are things that we have not done. It's done for politics, and it's simply not the American way. We are the American way. We are the mainstream of American political thought. We are going to seek excellence for your children. If you're interested, by the way, in healthcare, think of Pat O'Rourke, who said, as everyone should understand, if you think that medical care is expensive now, wait till it's free. If you want your health care to be run by the equivalent of the Department of Motor Vehicles, we're well on our way. No, bring back competition, bring back that whole process where you profit from your labors, where you spend your own money, and then you get quality. We're gotten away from that. And finally, again, the most important issue that we are facing is our deficit. None of the other candidates are talking about it except us libertarians, and it is a trap. It is a time bomb. We're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine, but our children are in trouble and our grandchildren are bankrupt. We are the only ones that stand up for you, stand up for your children, stand up for us all in recognizing these problems, and we will deal with them together. Not by calling each other names, but by being honest, by being straightforward. And then, I was a judge for 25 years. I was trained to listen. I was trained to get evidence from competent people, to evaluate it, and then make a decision and explain. That is what we will do in our administration. And we will be open with you, and we will profit by doing things that work. Following Milton Friedman's example, that let's judge our programs by the results and not their good intentions. We will be open, we're not going to profit, but we're going to all be successful together. This I will try to do. God bless America.
How can folks find out about Judge Jim Gray and Vice Presidential candidate Larry Sharpe?
Well, thank you for that. I'm proud of Larry Sharpe. You can go on his website, just Larry Sharpe, and see the Larry Sharpe story. I got tears in my eyes when I watched it. He has quite a story himself. You can go to Gray Sharpe 2020 with regard to our campaign. This is a burgeoning website. It's just beginning. Gray is Gray. Sharpe has an E on the end, so it's SHARPE 2020. Or if you really would like, Pat, would probably, in fact, take away the probably, I have written more about how I stand on the issues than any other presidential candidate in history, I would bet. That I have my book called 2 Paragraphs for Liberty, which is now on sale at Amazon, etc., talking about all of these issues. I wrote this book called A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems, and it's all out there. So it's pretty hard for me to equivocate because it's all there in writing. I'm struggling with these issues. Life is complicated. I don't have all the answers, but Gray Sharpe 2020, look into us, support us, and I promise you, we will do you proud.
Excellent. Folks, I want to ask you to stay with us after the judge leaves. We'll be on the air for a couple hours with some open lines. A phone number will be up, 401-205-3738. We'll be able to discuss this and virtually any issue on a local or national basis. Bring it on. Most importantly, though, I want to take the time to thank Judge Gray for joining us tonight, being literally an open book, answering a lot of questions, and really, again, I want to point out to this current crop of presidential candidates an astonishing background, both in, ironically, government life as a libertarian, in the military life. Folks often, when they look to third parties, they look at their candidates and say, well, he hasn't been elected to high office. Quite frankly, when you talk about a life well lived, when you talk and look to the candidates who are running for the president of the United States on the libertarian ticket, Judge Gray and all of our prior presidential guests are literally poster children for that, whether it be service in the Peace Corps, our armed forces, in the Coast Guard, volunteering in legal services, again, the backgrounds we have Renaissance men and women running for the highest office in the land. And as I said in 2016, I'll say the same thing in 2020. When it comes to the overall perspective on these individuals' lives, and I compare them to what is being offered to us as Americans by the statist, institutionalist, failed duopoly, Republican Democratic parties, it's breathtaking, the difference. It's absolutely breathtaking, the difference. So all of the folks that I've had the opportunity to meet, and some of the folks coming on, I will go toe-to-toe with anyone anywhere in the country with our candidates. We have great reason to be proud of them, not only of what they're offering the American people, but of the lives they've led. And let's remember that going forward. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us. Please stay tuned and hang in there as we make our transition to, I believe we might be one of the first, if not the first, overnight libertarian talk radio stations in America. None of this neocon crap, none of this duopoly stuff. It's conversations about issues facing Americans largely through a libertarian perspective. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Pat. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. I think we're going to do the little sign off right now. Please stay in touch.
Sure.
As we get closer to whatever passes for the convention, whether we're live on or not, I'll just share this. All of you are going to hopefully come back and just engage. I much prefer this, if you will, this conversational format. And we still may be on hot mics. I'll just say that, but I much prefer a conversational format like this than debates. I think everyone's kind of done their fair share of debates. I
agree.
And a lot of the parties that were able to have a live convention, there were some great moments in those debates. But I think at this point in time, we all know we're libertarians. Let's talk about the nuances between them. So thanks again, buddy, for joining us.
Pleasure. Look forward to maybe do it again sometime. Give me a call if you want. I'd be happy to.
We'll do.
Good deal. Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye. All right, I'm not sure if we're live or not, but we are the Coalition. If we're still live, yes, if we are still live, area code 401-205-3738. All right, I think we've got a call already. So is this?
Hello?
Hi, how are you? Is this Rhett back again?
Yes. How you doing?
Rhett Smith, thanks for calling back in. We appreciate it. So, just full disclosure, you are also a presidential candidate, as I understand. Correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I ran 4 years ago in the Libertarian Party, and I'm running this time.
All right. We will have you on. We preach fairness not because the government says we have to. We just think it's the right thing to do. So if folks are libertarian and they're running for office, we want to have you on. So, a couple minutes to talk. What are your, first of all, reflect, if you will. Tonight we had Judge Gray. Yesterday we had Ken Armstrong.
And I listened to most of Judge Gray. I did a little bit of Ken Armstrong, but I did listen live tonight.
No, we appreciate that.
Judge Gray.
If you could spread the word that there is actually Libertarian Talk Radio where you can actually just make a phone call in, just like the big networks. But so, what were your thoughts? What are your reactions to Judge Gray's comment tonight?
I love listening to him. Certainly, I had met him when he came to San Antonio, and he talks a lot about he was a judge and certainly dealt with the medical marijuana and all the issues of drugs. So he's the expert on that. He's, I would say, one of the world's great experts, and he is very well spoken. In other words, he can express himself well on that. Also, I wanted to ask him about the issue of history. Why are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Absolutely.
Good, good. Yeah. Why the Libertarians don't have a history caucus? Because I think we really hurt ourselves. The duopoly, as you and I call it, cannot claim history. Before the American Revolution and the Constitution, there was really no basis for the duopoly, and there still isn't, in our opinion. But there is a lot of basis for libertarian thinking and libertarian thinkers that helped frame the American Revolution, and we really need to reclaim that.
No, I'll agree with you on that. Now, I know that Karen Ann Harlow has done, and her committee, it's a team effort, but Karen Ann has really taken to heart Wikipedia. I'm sorry, we call it LPpedia, I believe. And there's almost a encyclopedic, listing of folks who've been involved in events in that. I mean, do you think, have you volunteered to work with her yet, or what are your thoughts on LPpedia?
Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, I'm working, do you know Lynn Atherton Bloxham?
I've had the opportunity to chat with Lynn a number of times online, and actually she's going to be the one of those people. I put forth a goal to libertarians halfway through, as if I'm anybody to put a goal to anybody. I claim no moral high ground here, but what I'm suggesting to people do during this time when we are in some form of claustrophobic coronavirus COVID quarantine. Say that 4 times fast. That we take a moment and reach out to libertarians that we haven't met, that we were intrigued by, that we've got questions of, and reach out. And actually, Lynn's on my list. So if she hears this, or somebody knows her, here's this, warn her to screen her phone calls carefully. But I would love to tell me about her. I would love to meet her, and she was on my list of people that I was hoping to meet on the at this convention if she was going. So, but. Jump it back in. Yeah. Tell me what your thoughts were about her.
She and I live in San Antonio, Texas, and so we're members of the BEAR, BEXAR. That's the Bexar County, one of the oldest counties in the United States. But because of the Mexican territory or Mexican and Spanish before the United States. But anyway, so. But she is from Arkansas and Missouri, and she was I consider one of the real founders of the Libertarian movement, or Libertarian Party. Mm-hmm. She was certainly a Libertarian thinker before the Libertarian Party, and she said she was actually on the telephone during the meeting when they actually formed the Libertarian Party. So she knew everyone of the founders. And she is a real national treasure for our party. We really need to, and she's trying to help Karen Ann Harlow with all the archives. And I'm actually trying to set a videotape record with her. I do a public access television show in San Antonio, and I'm trying to videotape her as much as I can. And just having her talk about the history of the party. I mean, she's just a wonderful talker. I mean, she is so natural because she's been doing this for 50, 60 years, and really, she's one of the best libertarian thinkers that we have today.
Well, I'm going to try and get her on the show because, like I said, I've had the opportunity. Maybe you can reach out to her. And we can talk offline. I would love to have that conversation with her. And again, the loss of the convention, I think you'll agree. We met briefly at the last convention. You may not remember me. The loss of the convention is not just a series of events or a loss of a series of parties. What it is a moment in time where all of us in the movement, number one, the first time you go to a convention, you're astonishing that there are that many people who kind of think like you. That's the first thing as a libertarian, right? I mean, you look into this crowded convention hall, and there's people from all over the world there, and we'll spend a couple of days disagreeing about everything, but always remember that we agree about most things. And there aren't enough of us out there yet to make that, particularly the first time, a blasé or common event. It's just not. I mean, it's life changing. if you're immersed in the movement, like folks like you, or and I won't consider myself in your, or certainly Lynn Atherton's Blossom's the category, but for folks of us who aspire to that, it's a revelatory moment. So missing that moment in the convention when the party chairman has everyone stand up, and if this is at this convention, and then has people start sitting down as he lists how many people have been to 10 conventions, 11 conventions, 15 conventions, and the number gets higher, and you see literally the statesman and stateswoman of the party. It's an emotional moment. You have to be. It is. You'd have to be. I don't know what you'd have to be to not kind of quiet a quick gulp, if you will, when you look at what folks who were there in the beginning have accomplished, and what folks who were there in the beginning had to suffer through. And I'm not trying to draw some equivalent that they're somehow been victimized, but at the same time, I think every one of us has taken shots from the mainstream unfairly because our thoughts are just different. We look at the world through a different prism.
Good point. Good point. And so basically what I really want to do is set up the history caucus so that we can really do a better job of educating our young libertarians that are into the party, and then giving them a way to really engage the duopoly, as you and I call it, the duopoly, because the duopoly is something that can really, I think many thinkers are concerned about the kind of mindless power that the duopoly puts forward, and really the danger of it.
No, absolutely. And by the way, so I'm gonna make a challenge to you. Let's get together. If you're not a Facebook expert, get together with someone who is, and start the caucus. You send me a message on Facebook. If we're not friends, reach out to me. I've only got reach out to me at Pat Ford if we're not already Facebook friends. I've got almost 5,000, but I got a few people that I think need to go. And then I'll publicize your efforts to do it, and I'll in any way, shape, or form I can help bring people to your attention. I'll be happy to do so. So I'll put that challenge out there. If you can get the page on Facebook started, which is a great way then to bring people together who can address some of the issues you're talking about. It's a wonderful point. I also want to point out to you that once a month I have a gentleman on. His name is Andy Hernandez. He's a professor, a PhD at the University of, or I should say, it's the Western New Mexico University on. And he spends he spends about an hour.
Wow, I think I know another professor there.
Yep, he spends an hour talking about the border. If anyone is, and that's not that far from you, but he teaches
very close. That's why I know about it.
Yeah, he teaches. He's in Deming, at the Deming area outpost, if you will. And he teaches a course, if you're ready for this, he actually teaches a course on the drug wars. He teaches an in-depth course on the history of the border, as we all know that there were cross-border atrocities, that the study of the wars between Texans, New Mexicans, and Mexicans is a long and bloody history that's been somewhat obscured because of some of the racist elements in it. He talks about the complexity of living and the seeming ordinariness of living on a border where Mexicans and Americans travel across that border on a daily basis without much drama. I met him when I journeyed with Tom Mann and Dan Fishman. We talk about this often on the show, but because for me it was a transformative experience. When Tom Mann and Dan Fishman and I went down to Deming, New Mexico to meet with the people who run a not-for-profit, privately funded refugee relief center. And these folks have assisted over 10,000 Latin American, Central American, and Cuban refugees in their journey across the border in the form of health care.
Wow. Which town or which border crossing was that?
This is the town is Deming. It's about 35 miles north of the border. you know,
Oh, okay.
it was.
Did you actually? I mean, a lot of because I've been to the border in Texas, and of course that's only in the news now, especially with all the encampments and the people trying to legally gain entry. Certainly, I've been to Brownsville and Laredo, and I know about El Paso, and I mean that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, this is the Palomas crossing.
Palomas,
Mexico.
okay.
And we actually went to Palomas, met with some refugees. I wish I could have been able to stay there. It was very. I don't know who they are. They've never told me, but some anonymous libertarian donors financed the trip. We interviewed people and went live with it, interviewing people who were volunteers, people who had been through the center, and then in a really provocative moment, we interviewed Cubans who were trying to get over the border while they were still kind of holed up in Palomas, and I don't know if they've ever been able to make it. So it's these are folks trying to go through the refugee process as opposed to just jumping the border, you realize how quickly, and the border, like I said, is just sort of an ordinary part of these people's lives. It's not, it's clearly become more militarized. It's clearly become very high security, but again, these are just regular folks. There are Mexican towns that send their children to school legally in New Mexico. They have relationships with the municipalities. Andy often talks about the number of Americans who go to Mexico for lower cost medical care, particularly elective and cosmetic medical surgery.
Brownsville, huge market there. Yeah.
So
used to have a cousin that used to do that. He actually had a clinic on the Mexican side of the border.
Yeah. So it's what does that say about American healthcare? That we're proud of, and we're so ambivalent about our friends and our brothers and sisters in Mexico. It's a real commentary. So it's for folks, and it was a real eye opener for me. And when he comes on, it's always an eye opener because I just I'm up here in Providence, Rhode Island. We're as far removed from that reality. Yeah, we have a lot of folks in Providence. In Rhode Island is got a much lower cost of living, if you will, than most of New England. And so it is a magnet city. There are jobs available for folks on that first rung of the economic ladder if they've come to the United States with or without paperwork. As a libertarian, I personally, I love your response. I'm an open borders guy. I just say, what do you can see? What are your thoughts?
Well, you can probably see on my I don't know if you can see anything on your screen or what I've sent you, but there's like my blue circle. It says I am an immigrant, and then so actually in San Antonio, the entire city of San Antonio came together to fight against the state of Texas policies because we wanted to offer sanctuary to as many people as we could, and we did to about 30 or 50,000. I mean, quite a few thousand would come, but we had hundreds that would be there every night, and these were actually legal that had been processed through the federal immigration system, and then they just kind of get dumped off. This is before Trump set the Mexican protocol or whatever it was,
right?
Remain in Mexico policies about 6 months ago. But before that, we would process them through the city of San Antonio and help them with the Greyhound bus or the airplane or whatever. And that was a major undertaking because the churches all came together and did it.
Right, and that's quite frankly the way it should be. Ordinary Americans helping people who want to become ordinary Americans.
Yes.
Pretty simple concept.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thanks for calling in tonight. I appreciate it. And, if you could tell folks down in Texas, we've only been on the air really about 2 weeks. So this is.
Really?
Yeah, this
is. It seemed like I had tried in the past. I'd heard about your program and tried to get in. Well, we must have been off the air and on the air.
Well, we've done for about 6 or 7 years an interview program that in its most recent iteration was about 3 hours long, and we'd have 2 or 3 guests on. Professor Hernandez is one of them. Like I said, we try to get him in here every month. In fact, he's due in the next week or so. and so I'll make sure you know about it.
Good.
But what we've done now in the midst of Corona is essentially, in addition to interviews like we just had with Jim Gray, we've created this notion of a talk radio station, and we're doing it over the internet, obviously, as opposed to the traditional, over the airwaves. But and we handle a lot of local issues, and we're open to all conversations. But by definition, what we're saying to libertarians is call in at nights. We're open from 9 till, well, however long it takes before I pass out, I guess, 9 till about midnight or so.
Okay.
And let's have a conversation. We've had a whole bunch of people call in over the week. It's interesting because there's times where I get to talk for a half hour or so between calls because it's, as you can imagine, we don't have the big budget to advertise. Not that anyone's paying attention. I can't rent a billboard outside of Providence right now that says, "Hey, there's an alternative to the same boring crap that you listen to on conventional talk radio." But
I was actually stationed in Rhode Island when I was in the Navy.
A lot of folks, there might be a caucus there because Judge Gray was, Ken Armstrong, who was on yesterday with he's a coastie with the Coast Guard, has been through Rhode Island. So maybe there's a caucus there. There is now officially a salmon caucus. So, damn, I think we can military people who got stationed in Rhode Island. Well.
And I was in Boston about a year ago. My son and daughter-in-law were there on a kind of an exchange program from Australia, and they were going to Harvard, or my daughter-in-law was. And so I went over and investigated the Pluralism Project. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
Something very important. I think it was started about 25 years ago, approximately, by Dr. Diane Eck, spelling E-C-K, Dr. Eck, and she's still lecturing at Harvard. I think she's getting up in years, but she started the Pluralism Project. She had done her, I guess maybe her dissertation research or so forth on the history and culture of Hindu religion in India. Mm-hmm. And so it's based on religious pluralism. But it kind of expanded into other kinds of cultural and just academic and community pluralism. So they've tried to reach out to other areas. I'm quite active in San Antonio with something called the Interreligious, so it's interfaith movement in San Antonio, and I think it's extremely important for our nation because you're probably a little bit familiar with the Protestant the Protestant Reformation and the whole idea of the way America, the movement of colonialism based on a lot of Protestant, some Catholic, but mostly the Protestant. I don't know if you'd call it diaspora or whatever from England and so forth into North America. So I think we've still got a lot to learn from the rest of the world about religion.
Well, here in the United States, Rhode Island is the birthplace, if you will, of freedom of religion. There is it's interesting because
Roger Williams, right?
The smallest, I believe, the smallest national park in America is the Roger Williams Memorial. The First Baptist Church in America is on the base of College Hill. And Red, if you make it out to Rhode Island again, if you're out here, come and visit, and I'll get you a tour. But the First Baptist Church in America is in Providence. In fact, the Reverend Jamie Washburn, who is the pastor, she was actually our keynote speaker at our Liberty Forum about a year or so ago. And it is the First Baptist Church in America, and we also the home of the first synagogue in America out in Newport. So I happen to go to a Methodist church in northern Rhode Island, which was started by a circuit preacher in the 1700s, and so the original core and timbers of the church go back to the 18th century, and that church still.
So you're saying the First Baptist Church? What was the date of that again?
Well, my Methodist church within, I think, in the 1700s, I'm actually, I am double checking, if you will, there is a meeting house, a traditional Baptist meeting house. It's funny. I'd be hard pressed to actually give you the date. I will find that out. The First Baptist Church in America has been on College Hill in downtown Providence since 1638.
Okay.
1638, sharing the good news with Christ-centered enthusiasm, biblical preaching, dynamic caring ministries. So, you know what? It's interesting. I should know this, but I will find out if there is an original core of that building or still original pieces that go back. I can't imagine. Wow, 1638. The John Brown House, by the way, which is right down the street, and through the intervention of the Providence Historical Society, much of what's called College Hill, which represents a lot of the original construction of Providence, which is one of the older cities in America, not the oldest, but one of the older, is still intact. So if you were to go for a campus tour of the Brown University or the Rhode Island School of Design, you would be right up against that whole section of Providence where the original slave traders live. Rhode Island has a proud heritage of being financed originally by the slave trade. Ironic.
Oh my God! Yeah.
There's
much of the colonial system. Yes.
Right.
Sadly, we don't want to acknowledge it, but we should.
Right.
True.
There's a very strong. I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a very strong.
Yeah. So when I was at Harvard, I was quite shocked to learn. How old do you think Harvard University is?
Oh, it goes back to, I think, the early 1700s. Is it? Again, this is stuff I should know. I don't. But
yeah, try 100 years earlier.
So it actually is in the 1600s. Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable. I think earlier than Rhode Island.
There's a very strong Quaker education presence in Providence. The only all-girls Quaker prep school in America, K to 12, is in Providence. And then there's the Moses Brown School, which is also in Providence, which is Quaker-based. Interestingly enough, the all-girls Quaker school, which is called the Lincoln School, actually has a Quaker silent meeting for all their children on a regular basis who come from a variety of religious backgrounds. Really, it's a very international school. A lot of the children there are children of folks who are at Brown or the Rhode Island School of Design, and the community at large. So there's every imaginable religion there, but they all do attend a Quaker silent meeting on a weekly basis when school's normally in session under more normal times. So it's it's there's a Quaker meeting house in San Antonio, so I got Quakers were still that active, but wonderful experience. And of course, their meetings are silent. But I'm kind of interested because Quakers are in Pennsylvania, right? William Penn and all that. Yeah, no, it's they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's
and really anti-war. The Friends or the Quaker. What's the name of their Friends Committee against the war or whatever? The Quaker Friends.
Yeah. No.
So
Well, interestingly enough, if you get to London, there is a place right near Wesley's Chapel where John Wesley preached, and you can go to daily service at Wesley's Chapel. There is something called the Graveyard of the Nonconformists, which I visited, and many of the founders of the original the Methodist movement and the Quaker movement are buried there. The Methodist movement started out. It's interesting because in different parts of the country, there are some very wealthy Methodist congregations, but Methodism as a religion started out amongst the working class poor by John and Charles Wesley. And when folks wonder about the high, if you run the gamut of Protestantism, particularly the, for lack of a better term, the non-African Methodist Church, the quote unquote, institutional Methodist Church, why there's so much singing, and the reason why there's so much singing is because and why the Wesleys constructed this vast library of religious musical ministry is that many of the or if not most, of the original Methodists were illiterate. And so folks learn their text, learn their religious text, learn their Bible by singing it. And it was quite innovative at the time of the Wesleys, but it literally took the illiterate and it gave them an opportunity to learn religious verse. So you can make a whole
makes sense.
Make a whole study of the Methodist movement. It's in its own way, it's one of the more political Protestant churches within that rainbow, that bandwidth of Protestant churches. It's they're very anti-gambling and very pro Native American, and have been in quite a lot of controversy lately because of the open debate over same-sex marriage. So it's in its own way they are very libertarian, if you will, if a religion can be. So
some. I was raised in the Methodist church.
Yeah.
So I'm really enthused about the pluralism project and the interfaith movement in America, and I think we all can benefit greatly from it. I've been really studying the Hindu religion and groups locally that are here in Texas, but Native American religion, which wasn't even recognized as a religion until the Jimmy Carter administration, 1970, whatever.
Right. Well, it's an interesting set of reactions. I have to take a quick break right now, but don't be a stranger. Again,
let's do it again.
If you can tell folks what we're trying to do here, I'd be grateful. It's a challenge getting libertarians to talk to each other as opposed to send written messages. It's a challenge. I'll just leave it at that. But hopefully I think you found us to be a little different than most talk radio. So and reach out to me next week, and we'll get a time when you can come on and give folks a shout for what you're trying to do with your campaign. All right, buddy?
Certainly. Again, take care.
Have a wonderful night.
And you too.
We're gonna take a quick 10-second break here because me, the host, I have been talking now for a couple hours nonstop. It's a challenge. Let's just say the spirit was willing this morning when it came to talking, but me and Kermit had a few things in common. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course coalitionradio.us. A couple things lined up for this weekend. First of all, at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, if you go out to the LPTV channel, we are going to have a couple of folks on who represent, I believe, some really interesting candidacies. We'll be posting that up soon. The point of that show is to have a conversation. Again, this channel is all about conversation. If you don't like conversations, yikes, you might be in trouble here. But we have we'll share it to the Coalition Radio page so folks can watch it here, or they can go to LPTV. We should ask you to like the page. We'll be posting that here as well. Doing a lot of cross-posting, a lot of cross-promotion. The point being is that libertarian candidates get together, talk for a couple minutes, then each talk for about a half hour about issues as they impact their districts, their congressional districts, their House, Senate districts, their council district. And the point is, regular folks aren't really that interested in Murray Rothbard, which I find tragic, and they don't know what they're missing. But that's a separate battle from getting them to vote for us. You see, there are plenty of people who, given the opportunity, might vote for us, but might not ever join our party. And we need to respect that. That's their decision, and we need their support as candidates. If we solely rely on practicing libertarian members of a local affiliate, we're going to be in trouble. So how do you frame every day, I call them lunch pail issues. You'll hear me harken back all the time to that famous sign in the Clinton War Room, "It's the economy, stupid." How do you get them to vote for us? Everyone's heard the term "all politics is local." Everyone's heard the term, no, they understand that different delegations, different districts are going to look at things differently. I'll give you a case in point. When the judge was on, we had a conversation about the Trump administration's decision to engage with Saudi Arabia and Russia, two countries that we have a long history with. A lot of it not so good. But in the spirit of trade, we entered into negotiations with them. Well, first of all, what's government doing negotiating on behalf of a commodity? Are you kidding me? Are you nuts? Then what's government doing, American government doing, encouraging limits on production? Again, these people make a decision on their own to pursue what they consider to be their best interest. The net result, of course, is that according to this, and by the way, anyone who's followed OPEC for any period of time understands that, in fact, their idea of a long-term agreement could be days, maybe weeks. So who knows? But yikes. One of the few and few benefits of being in a terrible situation like this is that the cost of certain commodities fall because, well, hello, there's less demand for it, and there is an ever-increasing supply. It's called a glut. Now, I am not going to conflate economic advantages with the tragic, horrific loss of human life. So let's not go down that road. But from an economics perspective, in market environments like this, you've seen the price of a significant commodity that literally interacts with every single business fall precipitously. We see it in the price of gas. Now, we're all going to have to get back to business soon. We're all going to have to figure out a way to open the doors. By the way, a whole other conversation is the notion that government is going to open the doors of America. Are you kidding me? What the hell would they know how to do? Again, let's move past that. So, if in fact, you're going to interfere with pricing, interfere with the economy, interfere with the supply, the market chaos that's going to take place is horrific. But here's the problem. If you're a local candidate in Texas and you're looking out across your citizenry and understanding a lot of them are in the process of getting laid off, and that the potential price increase in gasoline and oil may keep them at work, again, that's a lunch pail issue. There are no easy answers. You stare someone in the eye who has got a mortgage and college bills for their kiddos, and tell them that, give them a lesson in economic fundamentals. First of all, they're probably smart enough to understand it already. So don't condescend, or let's not patronize people around here, unless, of course, they're fans of the Cheeto. Cheetos leave a stain, by the way. So, but for them, we're talking about survival, and anyone who has seen the carnage that the boom and bust effect on oil markets has had throughout places like Texas understands the real impact on human life. Somehow you have to divorce yourself from that. And it's easy for me to do because I don't live there, and I'm not employed by that industry. I won't lose my job because of that. I already lost my job because of the government. So, how do you face that person? So to say that issues like that have nuances and complexities is the understatement of the year. Already had that argument this week with folks. Shades of gray, one friend called it. I guess I'm willing to take and look at the longer picture economically. I'm willing to say, ironically, the greater good. When's the last time you heard a libertarian saying that? So it's quite a conundrum once you start running for office, and even more so once you start getting elected. It's the real world. And bear with me, late at nights, I'm the producer as well as the talker. Super producer Joel wasn't feeling well tonight. He's fine now. But he needs some time off because he's also got a real job. So it's a challenge. And that's something we have to gear up for because we are a party of philosophers. We are a party of economists. We are a party of theorists. We are a party of a belief system. A rather well-documented, well-articulated, and well-supported one. But once you get elected to office or you're running for office, hello. Here come the shades of gray, as my one friend put it. Here come the nuances. I can remember years ago, and I've worked in the truck business for about 20 years. I've sold trucks. I spent a year and a half working for a General Motors dealership. I'm a Ford guy. I bleed Ford blue. And that's something I'll debate till the end. So, so I'm at church. As I mentioned, I'm Methodist, and Pastor Roger, wonderful man, long since retired, weighs in about General Motors cars and tells people that they kind of imply that they're a not so nice thing, and they're gas guzzlers or this or that. And on the way out the door, I just mentioned to him as an aside, I said, I think you should know that I feed my family selling General Motors products. And that's all I said. I really wasn't trying to make him feel bad, but I was a little pissed. I just needed him to know that. And the look on his face, it looked like I had crushed him. I may have been the first person he ever met who worked at a car dealership. I just may have. Yeah, I got a title and a role, and I sold the businesses, blah, blah, blah. I'm a glorified car salesman. I got a title. I sell trucks. Big honking trucks. As I mentioned, anytime I talk about this, I've got a permanent hole in the ozone layer named after me. So, so life isn't simple. My friend Felix would never listen to this show. Probably because he probably thinks we trash the president too much. President Cheeto, the orange Cheeto. There's a website, by the way. I believe it's actually a Wikipedia page that doesn't actually lists all of his nicknames. If you go up to Wikipedia and do a search of list of nicknames used by Donald Trump, it'll actually talk about the nicknames he gives to people. For Joe Biden, let's list the names. 1% Biden, 1% Joe, Crazy Joe Biden, Quid Pro Quo Joe, Sleepy Joe, Very Slow Sleepy Joe, Sleepy Creepy Joe, Little Michael Bloomberg, Mini Mike Bloomberg, Mini Mike. Oh, I'm sorry. Mini Mike, that's for Michael Bloomberg. All right. Low Energy Jeb, of course, Jeb Bush. He actually called Pete Buttigieg Alfred E. Newman. If there's anybody out there in my listening audience who knows who Alfred E. Newman is, please call in. I'm not sure we have any prizes here. I think I've got a coupon here somewhere for your free coffee at Wendy's. In one of those peel-off tabs, I'll mail it to you. So I can tell you I got your prize. But if you know who Alfred E. Newman is, please give us a call. So yeah, if you, so we're rounding out the evening here. I believe we were on with the good judge for over an hour and a half, which is why I had to laugh when he said to me, you know, he could outlast me. I once kept a candidate for Rhode Island governor in our old show where you basically stood up or you sat on these great little company that hosted us, but the seats were brutal. It was kind of glorified bar stool for almost 2 hours. He was crying at the end, I think. Waited to the end to ask him all the really hard questions after he'd been uncomfortable for a while. He was one of those Republican types. And by the way, I know who Frank from Newport goes, I know who Cardinal Newman is. No, that's not who we meant. Not who we meant. I'll give you a hint on Alfred E. Newman. His favorite saying is, "What me worry." His second favorite saying is, "I'm only here for the beer." By the way, Frank from Newport runs a wonderful organization called Newport Marketing. If you're a Rhode Islander and you've got businesses that are open, you just go to npmarketing.com. Opportunity for free to list who's open. And the real heroes, I was talking about people running for political office. The real heroes right now in America are obviously our medical professionals, but also the businessmen and women who have found a way to tweak around their business so that they've managed to support. So if you go to nptmarketing.com, you'll see all sorts of wonderful, highly local businesses. Hey, there's the Coalition Radio Network. Yacht Club Soda, the finest soda on the planet. I'm drinking one because it's here, I'm drinking one of the refinery sodas tonight. Oh, because I need the caffeine. Since 1915, premium sodas. Listen, you want to kill a root beer? I would always rather have a root beer than a real beer. Sorry, I know that makes me less than a man, but I would always rather have a root beer. Their root beer, their cream, their sarsaparilla, without equal. There's a couple little places around here that do their own vanilla ice cream. You want a root beer float? Oh, my. The Newport Chowder Company, I've had them on. They make a chowder mix. Listen, if you want to experience clam chowder, go to the Newport Chowder Company. They'll send you a kit that you can make at home. Sorry, folks. You don't have seafood like we have seafood. So you need to support local businesses. And right now, they need your support. Some other great businesses. Boulevard Nurseries out there on Aquidneck Island. Newport Property Management. DePaul Diesel. Fishing charters. Listen, when Rhode Island opens up for business again, we're going to need you. Because let me tell you, here in Soviet Workers' Paradise, Rhode Island, things were pretty rough before this happened. A lot of good people. Disproportionately, the economy here is based on small businesses. All right, Frank, if you need a root beer, Centerdale, Rhode Island, the home of Yacht Club Soda, yachtclubsoda.com. They do mail order now, by the way. So you go to yachtclubsoda.com, they will ship you a mixed case, a regular case. That they will do. Now, there's a couple places you can watch the coalition and watch. We're going to be opening up some more shows, some more programming over the next couple weeks. And you can do so at coalitionradionetwork.com. We've got a Rhode Island golf show coming up. Working out the logistics. When we built this little facility, it was with the expectation that people were going to come here and run their shows or be on there. Obviously, that hasn't worked well. God bless, we had the foresight to put in our own remote facility so that people could dial into the show. By the way, if you ever want to dial into the show, it's just a phone call. You don't need to link onto a stream, or you don't need to. This is old school. We're running it just like you would a talk radio station in your hometown. In this case, it's 401-205-3738. Yeah. And again, we were talking about our challenge to libertarians to go out and meet people in their movement. (401-205-3738). We usually run till about midnight. Our guest ran long tonight, and then we had Rhett from San Antonio, Texas, call in. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Gonna have some more of that refinery caffeine. I do love me the dew, but I'll take one of the Yacht Club Colas over at any time. We ran out here in the studio. I'm looking at 2 cases of empty bottles. Whew. That's a sad, sad sight. A sad, sad sight. Again, 401-205-3738. We've got about 15 minutes left before we go off the air. We will be back on tomorrow night and tomorrow afternoon with a variety of programming, which we'll be posting. Some of the issues are local. We call it the Coalition because it's actually, we have a variety of, we have a phone call. We have a variety of political causes, and folks walk here. Click on our super software. Hi there, welcome to the Coalition. Who do I have the honor of speaking to, and where are you from?
Matthew Butts. I'm from California.
Oh, what part of California?
Kern County, just north of LA.
Excellent. And, I'm going to give you plenty of time to go into what you want to talk about, because I know you messaged me earlier. But the first question we're asking everybody, how are you doing with all this? What's your status? Are you currently in school, or are you working? Are you home now? What's happening in your world?
I work construction, and I guess they're considering that essential.
Okay, good.
And so I took last week off because of the rain, but besides that, I've been working.
Okay. Now let me ask you a quick question first, and I want to give you plenty of time to ask your other questions. I believe we're going to be facing a dilemma soon, because if in fact this $600 a week of bonus money comes out on unemployment, and depending on the state, you may find yourself in the situation where you're making $1,000 to $1,200 or $1,300 a week on unemployment. How are people going to feel about going back to work if you're making $60 a year?
Is that a week, or is that on a weekly or a monthly basis?
Well, in Massachusetts, for full disclosure, I'm a libertarian. I'm a chairman of a state libertarian affiliate, and I am unemployed. I worked full time. First time in 30 years. I think I took 2 or 3 weeks of unemployment back in like the 80s. Other than that, I'd never taken it before. The government decided that my side, I sell trucks, Matthew, Ford trucks, and in Massachusetts, and the Republican governor decided that you could keep your repair facilities open, which we do, but you couldn't keep your sales operations open.
Yeah.
And it had been dead for about a week or two going into it anyway, because people were so unsure and uncertain. And to my employer's eternal credit, they carried us for a couple of weeks. And then the state said, you got to shut down. So he laid us off with the expectation that we're going to go back. We have no idea what we're going to go back to. I work for a sizable Ford dealership, great people. Just a wonderful company. In another story, another time, I'll tell you about what they do for local charities. But so all of a sudden, I'm unemployed. In the state of Massachusetts, I believe the top rung, which I'm at, you get without dependents, you get about $524 a week in unemployment. And then on top of that, if you have dependents, you can get another $100. So you could actually get over $600 a week in unemployment. Now, if you add to that this federal stimulus of $600 a week, which is purportedly coming out, you have the real potential of making $1,200 to $1,300 a week doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's more than double than what I make in a week, and I get paid $15 an hour.
Yeah, it's tough. So the question is, what's the incentive to work if the government? Because I'm on the dole, I'm on the teat, I'm getting the kiss in the mail. What's the incentive to go to work? Now, ironically, I'm taking this time to try and push out libertarian broadcasts, but it's which is there's some would say hypocrisy, or some other people would say irony in there. I'm not sure, but I just want. I
don't think it's irony. I don't think it's irony at all. If you've been paying taxes all your life, Social Security that you'll probably never get, Medicare that you'll never see. and you've been robbed your entire life, and this is just you recuperating some of that cost. And I would suggest maybe buying a gun or donating to an LP candidate with that money, because either buy protection or fund the revolution with their shit. Just fuck them.
Well, and I appreciate that. Thank you, because I need the moral support. What we're trying to do here, because this is the first time you've called in, we call this the Coalition Radio, and I've actually been on the air for about 6 or 7 years. I did a once-a-week interview show for a couple hours. I've got a couple.
Are we live right now?
We're live right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just called the number. I didn't actually click the link.
Okay, that's no worries. So and I'd love it if you like this. If you listen a couple times, you like it. I'd be grateful if you spread the word, because this is all a couple of us have come together and put this together ourselves. We don't got anybody. We don't got big government or big companies financing us. Sadly, I'll take the money. But but anyway, so the purpose here is. I've done an interview show for about 6 or 7 years, and a lot of libertarian stuff. I have some think tanks that come on. The Goldwater Institute, Fired, covers free speech. The ACLU on constitutional issues, a whole bunch of stuff. And then I got the opportunity to set up a facility for less money than what we were paying to be at someone else's studio. And so now all of a sudden I have 7x24 broadcasting access here. We're on the web at coalitionradionetwork.com or on the Facebook at facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. And we do a live stream.
I've been following you guys.
We can now put out, we're actually putting a signal out to YouTube, to Periscope. But what we're trying to do here is, and I appreciate you listening, what we're trying to do here is create a real libertarian talk radio station, old school. You don't have to, no complications. You just dial the phone number and you're on the air. And you can watch, you can, once we get return to normal, we'll have more people in studio, we'll have sets and a couple other things that we're going to try to do. But, awesome. Imagine from 9 to 12 or whenever I pass out or whenever the call's end, people calling in and about a guest that we might have had, about a subject they want to talk about, and talking about libertarian issues, and being unapologetically libertarian, no excuses, third rail issues. It's the internet, so, certain presidential candidate from California who's been on a couple of times, by the way, and we've had some fun with. But Mr. Whitney was on last week and this week as well. But that's the point. It's pretty simple. Libertarians calling in to talk radio and us trying to generate some energy. And there's some great podcasts out there. There's some great streaming television shows, streaming video efforts out there. I think we're the only ones doing.
Dave Smith was a part of the problem. He's getting really big. He just had Thomas Massey on, nice. And then he also did a crossover podcast. He was on Jimmy Dore show, and then he had Jimmy Dore on his show.
Excellent.
And you know who Jimmy Dore is, right?
Yeah.
He's a progressive podcaster, but I have to say he's one of the good progressives.
There you go. Well, I actually got to go to. I didn't go to the debate, the Nick Sarwark Smith debate. I did get a chance to go to Michael Heiss's after party. I finally got to meet Michael Heiss, which was great.
Yeah.
The after party in New York, and Mr. Smith was holding.
Yeah, I felt some bridges were built, and I was a little surprised that the national chair said that libertarians should be obligated to vote for the LP nominee, no matter who it is. And then when asked if that nominee were to be someone like Dick Cheney, should libertarians still be obligated to vote for that person, even though they are clearly not a libertarian? And right. He said yes. So,
well, I
completely disagree. I completely disagree. Like I held my nose and voted for Gary because I felt like I was holding water for a spaz. Mm-hmm. But and then with Bill, like, gosh, that guy, don't even get me started.
Well, we'll tell you the history of Bill Weld here. This show.
I've followed pretty clearly. But what really pissed me off about Gary's campaign was his campaign manager. I heard walked away with $1.4 million of donor money out of the campaign in his pocket. He have you heard anything about that?
I have heard a lot of allegations. Now, full disclosure, I'm on the LNC as an alternate. I'm no power player.
I'm pretty sure it's been outed. Like Gary's talked about it. Like it was one of his, like it was his close friend.
Well, Ron Nielsen was a campaign manager, and there have been
that's the name.
A lot of noise about the profits made off of running libertarian campaigns. And when I look at this current list of candidates and I see how they just bleed personally in order to run for office, I finally got an opportunity to meet Jacob Hornberger because I was up in Vermont at the Vermont LP convention. Now, Jacob Hornberger's got his own publication to do. He's got a family. He's running for the president, and he managed to find a way to go to one of the smallest affiliates in the nation. We're the same size in Rhode Island, where I am, as Vermont. Great people up in Vermont. But, here's a guy who, at great personal expense, took the time to reach out to a newly emergent Vermont Libertarian Party, and no one's stroking him a check. And I don't know exactly what the amounts that were spent. I just don't. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I probably should. What I'm trying to do is I'm looking at guys like Jacob, and Mr. Armstrong was here as well. And when I look at the personal sacrifices they make, what I'm trying to do is focus on them because they, again, there's clearly been some real shysters that have found their way through our libertarian doors. But to your other point,
yes,
you should vote for whoever the hell you think is going to be the best candidate. I would hope, because I'm a big supporter of the Big L.
The libertarian candidate, of course, would be the best choice, but at the same time, like, why would a small L libertarian, like this would be me in 2016, why would a small L libertarian like vote for somebody who claims that libertarianism is socially liberal and physically conservative? Like, that's not who we are at all.
It misses the point completely.
We are libertarian completely. Like, we aren't conservative. We aren't liberal. Not even even in our personal lives. Maybe some of us have a more traditional lifestyle, while others have a more alternative lifestyle. But at the same time, like that's not a liberal conservative divide there.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's all about being anti-authoritarian. You can't, sure, school vouchers is a step in the right direction, compared to the current system, but at the same time, it's still the same thing. And it still has all the same problems.
Right.
And I'm forgetting the name, and I probably shouldn't bring it up without remembering the details, right? But there's some guy that I think was on the Tom Woods podcast who has been building schools, like low cost private schools, where they don't have any extracurricular activities. There's no buses. I think kids have to bring their own lunch. There's no sports or anything like that. It's just education. And basically, I think tuition was somewhere around $1,500 per student, something like that, for the year. And then they also had a program, their own personal program, where people had donated money, where people who can't even afford the $1,500 can still go. I forget where this is. I'd have to look it up and message you on Facebook.
Well, I'll give you another example. I don't know that one, but I'll give you another example. There's an organization called Nativity Prep, and my understanding is that, and there's one in Boston. It's a Jesuit middle school, so it's religious. So it's sponsored by the Jesuits. I had an opportunity to meet the principal, and most of these Nativity Preps don't charge anything. The formula is very strict. There's uniforms. There's severe attendance issues if you start bailing. It's a lot of homework, a lot of studying, a lot of schooling, and again, this is run by private money, and and you don't have. I'm understanding you don't have to be Catholic to go there, but they have a remarkable record of sending kids to post high school education, both colleges and vocational schools, and it's done for free. It costs the government nothing, and they do it as a mission. And that's
awesome.
Yeah, and they're all across the country. So there are plenty of places where you can be free. I mean, one of my favorite hashtags, dude, I'm a radical libertarian. One of my favorite hashtags is end public education. I don't mince words. I don't try to dance around it. If, as I told our guest this evening, if I could find a place physically that I could take all the kids in American schools, and let's just say they were done Memorial Day, and I could figure out a place to put them by Labor Day, we're doing it. Just end it. Kill it. American public education has failed on every single level.
As Hornberger said, the point of being a libertarian is to dismantle these state programs, not to replace them with anything, not to have not intermediate steps, just to be wiped away, just to be wiped away later. It is to completely dismantle the state, and at bare minimum, 95% of the federal government is illegitimate, if not the whole thing.
They hold no place in my life, although ironically I am on the dole now. But I appreciate your comments about, I've been screwed for everything else, so getting a little back ain't bad. But to your point, I
fear with that, back circling back around to that, is we have more dollars chasing less goods, with production being shut down and unemployment being somewhere around 30% or so. This is going to be a depression based around stagflation that we're going to be facing. And
that's very legitimate.
It could very well make the Great Depression of the 30s be renamed the Little Depression.
You're absolutely right. We're inflating the economy by printing cash, while simultaneously we're decimating the private sector. We're making an entire generation of people who weren't dependent on the government. And so at some point, the little merry-go-round's got to stop, or the little musical chair's got to stop. And someone's got to, at some point, create wealth. Someone's got to create something that is sold for something to somebody for something, so that somebody's making something. It's got to happen. Hornberger's exactly right. Like I said, I got to meet him finally at an event, and we just spoke for a minute or two. I'm not anybody that important, but he's a little. Jacob's a little, seems like he won't come out and talk to you. Like, some people seem to think that, like, he's seems to be like not socializing enough, I suppose, at the conventions or something like that. But he, like, when I met him at the California convention, like, I basically stayed by his side after the debate and was like, "Hey, meet this guy, and meet this person, and meet this girl, and oh, the Lions of Liberty are live outside. Come on outside." And just he's probably not going to come up and talk to people he's not going to jump into a conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. He's very much that, you're that lighthearted uncle or something. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, it's listen, it's.
And what I love about him is that, he seems to be the epitome of what I've been looking for, as far as, he's principled and radical, but at the same time, he can deliver a principled, radical message in a pragmatic fashion. He can say it in a way that's not going to, trigger the average person. He can really sit there and explain it in a way that's not going to put somebody on the defensive. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so he's pragmatic in that way, but he doesn't water down the message at all. Like, it is pure Rothbardian Mises libertarianism.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you, and that's I suffered through the 2016 election like you did, and I suffered listening.
I voted for Gary more because of the down ballot candidates, and if it's not Hornberger, then if I do vote for the LP, I'm not going to vote for RD. I would probably, if anything, I would abstain from that and vote the rest. But at the same time, I will probably vote for the LP nominee for our down ballot candidates because that's ballot access and stuff.
Right.
Which I don't see anybody being able to get ballot access. What is it? It's a 3% threshold. Is that right?
It depends on the state, and that's a challenge. I mean, in Rhode Island, where we are, believe it or not, we have to get 5%. 5%. And we actually had an outside chance. We ended up in Rhode Island last time. We got 3.5%, which in any other state in the almost any other state in the country, we would have had ballot access. Unfortunately for us, Bill Weld came along and turned us into a laughingstock. And
then I've also heard, Mosh has been supposedly going to jump in, this week for like the last year. Right. Or something, and then I seen something where he suspend his re-election campaign? Well, did I hear that right?
Well,
I'm not sure.
They're very careful in how they say that, which makes me suspicious. I talk a lot and I'm a wordy guy, but when it comes to that, tell me, are you running? It's April. Are you running for president or are you running for Congress? It's okay, whichever you pick out. God bless you. Just pick one out.
At this point, I would rather him just stick to what he's already doing. I've heard that he's fundraising great. Despite everything, his seat is pretty safe. He has all the independents behind him. He has the real conservatives behind him. He has the Democrats who don't like their establishment. He has those voters, and then he also probably has all the libertarian voters because, like in Kentucky, LPKY doesn't run somebody against Massey. I assume LP Michigan doesn't run anybody against Amash usually.
Right.
And so he would have all the L voters as well. I think his congressional seat is a lot safer than people think. But if he were to jump in now, or even when I had heard this rumor in February or March or whatever, again, that I'm done. Like, that shit sailed in January. I will probably change my vote to Vermin Supreme out of protest if he were to join in, just because it feels like a slap in the face to all the work that everybody else has done. I've committed myself to the Hornberger campaign, and in January it would have been a mosh, but I've already committed myself, and I've already put in all this time and effort, and be like, Justin just shows up and it takes all that away.
Yeah, no, there's a question of what is it a commitment to the party and to the philosophy, or is it simply an adventure of self-aggrandizement? Now, are you a delegate, if you don't mind me asking, are you a delegate to the convention?
Yes, my flight and Airbnb was already taken care of before the pandemic.
Excellent. So you
unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm hoping you should. I'm
probably like, I think Texas has a thing where anybody's flying in is detained for 2 weeks for quarantine.
Right.
So I'm probably going to try to find a carpool if I can, as long as they don't have like fucking border patrol at the state borders now or something.
Well, we
I don't know.
We do in Rhode Island. We've got the National Guard stopping people at the Connecticut and Rhode Island border, inquiring as to whether or not they are, whether or not they're going to quarantine for 14 days after they get here, and they're taking names. Except it's interesting. There's a group I know, a group of Liberty guys I know. In fact, we had the video, and I got to get the video from them and post it up in our place, who ran the border checkpoint. And it was pretty interesting because, that's kind of ballsy. They can give you a hard time. They're not going to put you in jail, but they can give you a hard time. So these guys actually rented a car with New York plates and ran the checkpoint. And a statey pulled them over. We have the videotape. This isn't some bunch of guys BSing us, right? They
Right.
they pulled them over, and the police officer asked who they were, and they said, "We don't have to tell you." And the policeman thanked them and told them, "Have a nice day," and they left. So
I've never met a cop. I've done that a couple of times, and I've never met a cop that actually took that answer like off the cuff like that.
no, I'm serious, absolutely serious.
That's shocking.
Yeah, no, it's they're a great bunch of guys. I'm going to get you a link right now if you want to go up, probably up on their website.
Okay.
Bear with me a second here. At this time of night, guess what? I'm the producer and the
man of many hats, huh?
Yeah, it's a labor of love, though. I love doing this. I'm glad you called in.
So I missed Gray, I assume?
Yeah, he was on.
Right.
We've got the technology for candidates to take calls. We're just working out the details, working it out. We don't want to do it live yet. I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay.
But anyway,
when you said 9, when you said 9 on your on your post, I was, and since Gray is in California, I was thinking this is Pacific time.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. We tend to, whenever we have guests on, tell your buddies if they want to listen, we tend to have them on later at night so that people in California can listen at 5 or 6 o'clock or so at night. We're sensitive to that. It's a challenge because, what we're trying to do here is present a different take rather than just have a debate, which have gotten, at this point, these candidates have debated a lot. But even though now, in this case, he just jumped into the race. But we just want to have long conversations with him. So, by the way, the Rhode Island Accountability Project, all right, is the name of the website. And if you just Google that, Rhode Island RI Accountability Project, what these guys have done, by the way, this is kind of remarkable. I think you'll get a kick out of this. And it's taken years, and they've been involved in several court cases. They've been supported by the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. They've created a database of police reports where police have, let's just say, been misbehaving. And they get the police reports fed to them by the local police departments. They've established with these guys that if you don't send them, if they don't send them the reports, they're going to file complaints. They're going to go after them. The website is riaccountabilityproject.com. I'll share that actually on the coalition Facebook or on my personal Facebook. I believe we're Facebook friends.
Yes, we are.
All right, so I'm going to share that right now. So it's under Pat Ford on their site. Facebook has given my coalition radio site a lot of hard time in the last 2 months because I share too much. And they know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've caught a couple bans from groups because I overshared.
Yep. Yeah, it's it's tough because they don't want.
Pretty retarded. I was just trying to share the presidential our presidential debates around, and it's live, and you push share to group, and then you can post to like all your groups, right? And with the same sentence on there, and just share on all my groups, and I caught a ban.
No, and we get zucked. That's why we're trying to. By the way, truthfully, we have this. Like I said, there's all these different ways you can watch our show. We're asking people if they can get used to going if they want to watch our shows, and we're grateful if they do. We don't assume anything. But the reason why we ask them to go to coalitionradionetwork.com, we own that site. We just put video up. You watch it like you were watching a television set. And the point.
All the clicks is money in your pocket rather than having to share it with a platform like YouTube.
Well, but what's really critical to us is if YouTube or Facebook or Twitter shuts me down or shadow bans me, don't matter. You come to coalitionradionetwork.com, yep. You can watch everything we do. Now, I put that link up on my page, so just feel free to check it out. But
all right.
It's a database. Imagine this, and these guys are exhaustive about it, of internal affairs reports from Rhode Island police departments that they put online for everybody to check out. So you requested view internal affairs report. You can send out a letter to anybody. They put a lot of a lot of this stuff is online. Thank to them. So if I go to Cumberland, where I live, and I click on Cumberland, all right, all sorts of stuff comes up. So it's pretty cool stuff. And, the whole point is they're trying to get as many people online as possible, much of this information online as possible. So check it out. Now, you had a concern about radical versus pragmatic. So tell folks what you're, we're going to include this with the show tape. So tell folks what your concern is, and I'll address it as best as I can, and kind of give you a perspective. But again, you're talking to someone who's an avowed radical libertarian. What are your concerns about the candidate we had on tonight, or actually any of the candidates?
Well, he had an article or an interview, something like that, with Reason magazine, saying that he's calling for pragmatism. All right, so he basically said that he alluded that we should put pragmatism over principles. But how can you do that without being Republican light or Democrat light? Like, how can you be libertarian and be pragmatic without the principle? Like that, that's just centrism, isn't it?
And frankly, that's my concern. And I guess the way I approached it with him was I used an example of medical cannabis versus recreational.
Legalize all drugs.
Right. So
okay.
So he agrees that we should legalize all drugs. I agree we should legalize all drugs.
But what would he advocate for as the nominee? Like, he agrees with it, but how's his message going to be?
Well, it's
Gary, that was his platform in 2012 that legalized all drugs, but in 2016 it was just medical marijuana. I don't even think his platform included recreational.
Well, we all remember the moment on the Fox Business debate where they asked him point blank, would he legalize heroin? Now, I believe in legalizing heroin.
My brother died from a bad heroin overdose February.
I'm sorry.
Like the day after my son's birthday. And it's a direct, he bought something, he didn't know what the quality was, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't know what was in it. Was it just heroin? Did it have some baking soda in it, or some maybe like a sleeping pill crushed in it, mm-hmm. or did it have something like fentanyl? And it had a lot of fentanyl. He had just gotten out of jail, in like a couple days before Christmas, and so if he had been doing good and had just relapsed and was just doing like a shot that, a little less than what he would do before or something, it was still way too much because he had no tolerance for this, this killer drug that he had.
Right.
And, it's a direct, and tainted drugs, just like we've seen with alcohol so many alcohol deaths during alcohol prohibition, bad alcohol. That's the reason why my brother is dead right now. That's the reason why so many people have died. And what pisses me off is that the Libertarian Party has been around for 50 years now, or going on 50 years. And where's the results? Why is the drug war still going on? We seem to have our swords pointed at each other, not at the state. We have this pragmatic radical debate. Sure. It's more about messaging and strategy, I suppose. But then you also have the constant accusations of racism towards other libertarian members, or constant accusations of being, a communist on the other side, or something like that. It's like, this isn't productive. Like how is this conversation making us more free? It's not. Shut up and do something.
I agree with you. Let me explain to you from my perspective. Again, Gary Johnson, when put on the spot on Fox Business News, said no when they asked him if he would legalize heroin. Now, we should absolutely legalize all drugs. We should also legalize, it's legal in Rhode Island, fentanyl test strips. Here was my comment to law enforcement in Rhode Island, and I'm full disclosure, I'm the party chair. This show, by the way, is independent of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. I want to stress that. So I'm talking to you as Pat Ford. All right? But I will tell you what I've told law enforcement in the past. They are an institutional generational failure in their efforts to interdict drugs. In fact, their efforts have caused additional harm in terms of actual deaths by people in the community who used unsafe drugs, completely unknown. They are absolutely at fault for creating racial strife in this community because they practice, if you will, stop and frisk.
I call it the recycling of poverty between the drug war, welfare, and economic restrictions like the minimum wage has created a recyclation of poverty.
No, you're right. It's first of all, because of efforts like that, it's very expensive to be poor. There's another war going on that we talk about a lot on this show, and it's called the war on sex workers. They're using a lot of the same philosophy, a lot of the same approach to criminalizing sex work. It's so ridiculous. These women are supposedly victims, right? So at least in their mind. So you arresting victims? Why are you putting victims in a cage if you think these prostitutes are victims? Why? If they're victims, then they need help. They don't need a fucking cage. Well, and then of course, as far as I wouldn't just legalize sex work. I wouldn't even have it regulated because it's. And even now on the black market, if you were to ask a prostitute about, their, can you show me your latest STD report or something, they're going to have it because, it's, if they charge a price, this one girl that I used to drive around charged about $300 an hour. She wouldn't have been able to charge that much if she wasn't, a clean person. No, there's when it comes to consensual commercial sex, there's no victim, there's no crime. Two adults on their own making a decision to engage in sex for money. There's just absolutely no reason to put those people in jail. There's no reason to terrorize them. There's no reason to use the legal system against them. We just need to mind our own goddamn business. I mean, it's and it's simple on all of this.
You know what they're doing? You know what they're doing out here in California, considering that?
What's that?
Related to that? The strippers are being forced to sign W-2s now, or W-4s, and have withholding tax and all that, rather than paying them in tips. They have to be paid by the hour, and it's basically just some bitches in LA that want to unionize and then are using the state to force that on all their fellow dancers.
Yeah. Well, and if we've seen in California, you guys were the first ones to create all these quote unquote opportunities for gig workers. And let's look at the ultimate gig work, and that's being a waiter or waitress. If you talk to anyone who's a professional waiter or waitress, someone who really does it for a living, all right, it's not just
they
a
don't
job.
want to be paid by the hour. They would they would rather scrap the $2 an hour for an extra table.
Right, pure tips. Give them the tips. That's all.
Yeah,
that's all they really want. I mean, so it's really a function of let people make their own choices. It's really that simple. Let people make their own choices. And
timid men prefer the calm of despotism, and rather than the tumultuous sea of liberty.
Excellent. Well, we're gonna sign off for the night. But listen, should I call you Matt or Matthew? What would you prefer?
Either or.
All right. First of all,
Matt is fine.
Don't be a stranger. We're on most nights. This time frame, we're looking at, and once this Corona stuff is off, we're going to look to expand our programming. But call in any time. We got open lines. If we're covering an issue, just call. Feel free to call in. Again, this is Libertarian Talk Radio, run by libertarians. That's and we have other folks on. We have other issues that we cover, other groups. We call it the coalition because we see common ground with different political organizations, and we seek to explain ourselves and give an opportunity for folks like yourself to weigh in on issues in a way that's different from, say, social media. Actually have a conversation. And then we've been on the air with this effort for about 2 weeks. Once we get more people listening, then all of a sudden it starts to really fire up, because then folks are going to have an opportunity to react to what you're saying. There's people watching right now. Not everyone's comfortable with calling in, but folks, it's very simple. As you just saw, you didn't have to go into any stream or link or anything. You just call the phone number. That's it. And then we have a conversation. And if there aren't that many people listening, we can have a long conversation.
I'd say if I had my mind on us being live right now, I'd probably be a little bit more nervous, but I'm just having a phone call. So.
But that's it. It really is just a phone call. You're not performing, or and you get to say what you want, because I'm not interested in I'm interested in heated, hard conversations that are based on facts and issues. When you hear us in our sign off and sign in, we are what we call outrage porn free, and outrage porn, if people aren't familiar with the term, is used by the duopoly to get us upset and emotional over certain issues that have little or no meaning in terms of the liberty argument. They're just issues to distract us, and while other nefarious things are going on. So
I think abortion is a good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, people will use that. Go ahead, buddy.
Everybody's having the complete wrong debate. It should be about what can be done to reduce the abortion rate. Surely, even most pro-choicers that I've met, they don't actually advocate for abortion. They just think it should be an option. And I can't really. And I've moved my position from hearing about how can you trust the government to ban or to prohibit abortion? Like, that's going to expand the police state. You're going to have women who had miscarriages at home being investigated for abortion, and that switched me right there. It's like, it's a complete. Everybody's having the complete wrong debate, but my position was changed by somebody giving a completely different argument than everybody. Well, but I think everybody could agree that reducing abortion rates is a good thing. So what can be done to do that? Well, liberate the market so poor women aren't, feel like, they're just going to raise this kid up to be another, drug dealer or murderer or something on the street. Something like that, liberate the market there, legalize over-the-counter birth control without age restrictions, because as disgusting as it might seem, 12-year-olds do have sex. like that, like it's I hate it, but it's true. I remember being in 7th and 8th grade and hearing hearing other students talking about fucking,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or oral or whatever, and I'm just like, what? I don't even. Well, what do you mean? Like it was just completely blew my mind at like 11 years old, you know?
Right. I hear you. I hear you. Well, again, thanks for calling in tonight. Don't be a stranger. We're gonna have open lines some nights. We're gonna cover a lot of issues other nights. But hopefully you enjoyed your maiden voyage here on the coalition. And
Yes, of course.
let's do it again. All right, buddy.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a nice night.
You too, bud. There you go. That was Matt from California joining the coalition. Again, a pain-free experience. Talk radio. You get an opportunity to weigh in and make your feelings heard. And that's what we're trying to create here, is an environment where folks from a variety of political characters. Now, I'm a libertarian, so late at night we get really into the deep about it. But that's what just happened there is exactly what's supposed to happen on talk radio. People have now, and when we only have a few callers, we got plenty of time. Sometimes when hopefully we'll be jammed up with calls, we might have to take it a little bit more quickly. We're gonna take all sorts of liberty with the technology, but it's just, I love the forum. I love the medium. I love being able to talk to different people from around the country, and I love being able to present a forum where folks can weigh in with their opinions, because their opinions matter. We can agree to disagree as gentlemen. Their opinions matter. And one of the problems right now with this situation that's going on right now is that you've got a lot of folks who feel like their opinions, they feel like they're voiceless. And that's got to stop. If you live here in this country, regardless of, anything, you've got a right to be heard. We live in a republic. There isn't mob rule here. As the progressives like to say, not on my watch. Nope. So, on that note, I want to thank folks, if you're listening or you hear this tape eventually, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to even a part of our conversation here tonight. I want to thank Judge Jim Gray personally for spending an hour and a half or so. We got into it a little bit too. He and I agree to disagree on certain issues. On the other hand, I find other efforts of his to be nothing less than heroic. And it's important that folks understand that you can be a libertarian hero. You can be a hero of liberty, even if you're not a libertarian. At the same time, we don't have to agree on everything. That doesn't make us bad people. We can argue about it vociferously, but that doesn't make us bad people. So let's keep the conversation alive. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outreach, porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We are a listener-driven and a listener-donor organization. You can go to coalitionradionetwork.com, where if the spirit moves you, you can send us a few bucks to keep the lights on. You can join Patreon, which essentially acts like a monthly subscription. We appreciate any all support, particularly at difficult times like this, when folks may not have the normal resources. Coalition Radio signing off for tonight. We'll see you, later on tonight. Have a great night.